I'm Bob Moon.
All right, Bob, thanks. Now some other stories we're following. The finance industry in New York City won't recover from the coronavirus for 6 years. That's according to a new study from software firm ThinkIQ, which ranks U.S. employment markets. The New York area has lost about 8% of its finance jobs this year. It hit a peak of more than 800,000 last August. Senior Facebook employees are criticizing Mark Zuckerberg. They went on Twitter to express their unhappiness that the CEO is not taking action on incendiary comments President Trump has posted on their social network. Last week, the president posted a Facebook message saying, quote, "When the looting starts, the shooting starts." Zuckerberg says he didn't slap a warning on it because people need to know if the government is planning military action. And Goldman Sachs says the U.S. labor market is showing the earliest signs of recovery. In a report to clients, economist John Hotzius wrote a drop in continued jobless claims, especially in states that reopened earlier than others, suggests rehiring by businesses may be starting to turn the tide. Futures are moving lower, pointing to a lower open on Wall Street this morning. S&P futures down 5 points, Dow futures down 24, NASDAQ futures down 47 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuit look at luxury.
We're Cadent. Keeping you and our people safe is our main focus, and our vital work must continue. You'll start to see more of us in your area as we increase our work to upgrade the gas pipes to keep the energy flowing into your homes and businesses. We may need to come into your home to complete this work, but rest assured our engineers are following all government guidance on PPE and social distancing. We continue to provide the critical gas emergency service, and if you smell gas, call 0800 111 999. To all other key workers, we would like to say a big thank you from everyone at Cadent. Cadent, your gas network.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready. already.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gifts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app now.
Be part of the sports conversation with Sports Talk Radio on TuneIn. Join the discussion around your favorite local teams with sports stations broadcasting in your area.
The game will be 185 to 183 and somebody wins, whatever. Football, it's either full go or it's not. You got like, oh, it's thud. I can practice what they call
Follow
thud.
national storylines and debates with ESPN Radio.
Does the NBA have a hiring problem when it comes to front office jobs in the leagues and a minority hiring issue? Stephen A. chimed in on that today on First Take.
It also resonates with me, Max. You can appreciate this position. One of the candidates was Brian Colangelo. We know what happened. I like Brian, but we know.
And hear what's happening worldwide with international channels like Talk Sport.
Seems as I'm sort of doing my life in reverse at the moment. I was on cricket tours when I was 20 years old, and now I'm 31. I'm sat at home injured playing PlayStation. So it's a tournament basically where you create your own character.
In your backyard and around the globe, keep your finger on the pulse of the sports world with TuneIn.
Of news and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, protests and violence. These sounds from New York City in its fourth day of protests against police brutality. A similar scene played out in many large U.S. cities. In Washington, D.C., Congress is reacting.
South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, the only black Republican in the U.S. Senate, says there's no denying what happened to George Floyd.
Thank God for video.
He spoke on Fox News Sunday as the nation saw protests erupt in Minneapolis, where Floyd died in a police-involved action that shocked the nation. Protests also broke out in cities from coast to coast, including in the nation's capital. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tells ABC's This Week what happened to George Floyd is inexcusable.
I said right at the start that it was murder. We saw an execution of a person on TV.
Linda Kenyon, Washington.
Sunday capped a tumultuous weekend and month that saw city and state officials deploy thousands of National Guard soldiers. I'm John Trout.
They don't just talk to the most important people.
Is it as ominous this time around?
They talk with the most interesting people.
Are they taking this seriously?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. This update brought to you by Stevens Institute of Technology. Be a leader in the digital transformation of any business sector with an online master's degree or graduate certificate in information systems. Visit stevens.edu/infosystems. U.S. stock index futures are lower after Chinese officials told agriculture companies to pause imports of some American farm goods. S&P futures down 5 points, Dow futures down 30, NASDAQ futures down 42. The FTSE 100 is up 1.1%. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 0.65%, yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.7% or 26 cents at $35.23 a barrel, and COMEX gold is down 0.25% or $4.20 at $17.4760 an ounce. The euro 1.1107 against the dollar, the yen 107.72. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, protests have swept the United States in the last 6 days in the wake of George Floyd's death at the hands of police in Minnesota. Derek Chauvin, the officer arrested and charged for his part in the death of Floyd, was moved from the city jail in Minneapolis to another location. President Trump says that he was designating Antifa as a domestic terrorism organization after another night of violent protests. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. We're at 6:48 on Wall Street. Time to check what's going on in D.C., one of dozens of cities that have turned into scenes of upheaval as protests over the police killing of a black man in Minneapolis boil over. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi reacted to the death of George Floyd on ABC's This Week.
We saw an execution of a person on TV. We saw it happen. a knee to the neck.
White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien was on the same program. He says outside militant groups are taking advantage of the protests.
This is being driven by Antifa, and they did it in Seattle, they've done it in Portland, they've done it in Berkeley. This is a destructive force of radical, I don't even know if you want to call them leftists, whatever they are. They're militants who are coming in and burning our cities, and we're going to get to the bottom of it.
President Trump warned on Twitter that he'll label Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. He also threatened protesters outside the White House with tweets about vicious dogs and ominous weapons. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser tells NBC's Meet the Press the president should be trying to calm the nation.
And he can start by not sending divisive tweets that are meant to hearken to the segregationist past of our country.
Meet the Press, and this week can be heard every Sunday on Bloomberg Radio, along with Fox News Sunday and CBS's Face the Nation. On This Morning After, we're joined by Bloomberg U.S. politics editor Kathleen Hunter. And, it's remarkable to hear from the mayor of the nation's capital rebuking the president for his rhetoric. We also heard on that show from the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, essentially saying, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. It's a pretty extraordinary statement from mayors to a president of the United States.
Yes, absolutely, Nathan. And I think that what we're really seeing here is, some increased acrimony, between these heads of local government and the president, given how the president has approached these protests that we've seen really take off over the weekend in basically every major U.S. city. So I think it's not surprising that the mayors that are dealing directly with these protests are, hitting back the way that they are, especially given what Trump's rhetoric has been. And the criticism by some, I think, of Trump's rhetoric, which, people say is actually potentially doing more to kind of incite the violence, or at least incite the unrest, than to really try to quell it.
I don't know if there's any more stark mental image than the one we heard just this morning from Amy Morris in our Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom of fires reported at St. John's Church, the Church of Presidents, right across the street from the White House, just part of the major violence we've seen, as you mentioned, in cities across this country. What can we expect to happen further, given that what we've heard from the president so far, at least seen on his Twitter feed, is to take such a hard line?
Yeah, I think there's not a real reason to think that things are going to calm down, anytime soon. It seems like the president's strategy has been to kind of continue to keep this an issue, in some ways potentially to even fan the flames. We saw that even from his designation of Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization last night, a move that I think really amounts to being pretty much a symbolic move. There's a lot of sense that that's not going to have a whole lot of practical consequence. But, it does kind of underscore the Trump administration's response here, which has been to characterize these protests as being fueled by, far left extremist groups. We saw Attorney General William Barr giving a press conference on Saturday to that effect. And I think that is going to do very little, to say the least, to kind of calm down what's gone on over the weekend. And so I think that it's hard to imagine that, this week is going to bring any kind of swift resolution, and we could see these types of protests continue. And
it harks in a lot of ways back to what we heard from the president in the 2016 campaign, taking a hard line, and that inaugural speech about American carnage. And before that, the president positioning himself as the person who alone can fix it. Although it's a lot different now to be able to say that as you're coming into office, as opposed to trying to hold on to an office in a typical reelection campaign, you'd be trying to build on the positives. And it doesn't seem at this moment like there are many.
Well, and I think that is a sort of facet of Trump's presidency that we've seen time and time again, is when he feels as though he's a bit on the ropes. We see him going back to his 2016 playbook, whether that means, limiting, taking a harder line, at least rhetorically, or if not policy-wise, on immigration, or picking fights with China. We tend to see him, go back to those aspects of his 2016 campaign, those campaign planks of his platform that worked for him that time around. I think it's similar when it comes to this issue. We saw him in 2016 in his acceptance speech at the Republican convention, declare himself the law and order president. I think that is what he's really kind of going back to and placing emphasis on in terms of his approach to these protests. But as you point out, it is a different equation when you've been in office for 3.5 years than when you're casting yourself as an outsider who can come in and fix all this. It's a lot harder to say that, there's this, in 2016, this argument was always kind of cloaked in the idea that the Obama administration had failed on these points. And so I think that, whether this strategy works for Trump this time around remains a very, very open question.
Does this take some attention, though, off the response to the coronavirus that the president had taken a lot of criticism for in the past, particularly in his rhetoric toward the pandemic?
Well, I think it certainly can, and I think certainly that's going to be the Trump administration's hope right now, or the White House's hope right now, is that this does deflect some attention away from Trump's coronavirus response, which, has been pretty widely panned. I think it's important to remember that, these protests are happening at a time and have really taken over the news narrative at a time when, 1,000 Americans on average are still dying daily from the coronavirus. And so I think that, if you're the Trump administration or, if you're Trump campaign advisors and looking at the reelection, if that's your focus, then I think that talking about anything other than the coronavirus and the Americans that are dying and the people that have lost their jobs is definitely, a smart strategy. And so I think that is part of at least part of what's happening here is we're seeing, kind of this focus by Trump campaign advisors and Trump himself on, talking about something other than the virus.
All right. Thank you, as always, Kate. That's Bloomberg U.S. politics editor Kathleen Hunter. And you could read much more on all this at Bloomberg.com or on the Bloomberg terminal. Follow all the latest on Bloomberg Radio in Washington, Bloomberg 99.1 and 105.7 FM HD2. Karen.
Nathan, thank you. It is 6:55 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. It's brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology and the NJ Scholar Corps program, incentivizing residents who attend college out of state to come home and finish their degree in New Jersey. Learn more at njit.edu/NJ. Come home. Now, with what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math, here's John Tucker.
For the first time, humans have traveled to a commercially developed spacecraft. 2 American astronauts boarded the International Space Station from a SpaceX capsule, forging a new era for NASA and Elon Musk. The Dragon craft, carrying the 2 astronauts, arrived at the orbiting lab at 10:16 a.m. Eastern Time Sunday, about 19 hours after lifting off from the Kennedy Space Center. Now, the milestone flight is the first American astronauts have flown from U.S. soil since the Space Shuttle program ended in 2011. The achievement comes 18 years after Musk founded Space Exploration Technologies with the ultimate goal of populating other planets. And Apple is set to reopen its biggest stores in Japan from midday on Wednesday, bringing its physical retail network back online in one of its biggest markets. Shuttered after the coronavirus outbreak forced a series of restricted measures across the country. Apple stores in 3 shopping districts are reopening their doors this week. And a scientific team exploring underwater canyons off the coast of Western Australia recently discovered a gigantic swirling sea creature that measured at least 150 feet long. According to the New York Times, it's a symphophore, an organism made up of millions of tiny clones clustered together in colonies that form one mega animal. And that is today's Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. Karen.
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures down 3 points this morning. Dow futures down 2. NASDAQ futures down 36, so they are trimming their declines. The 10-year Treasury down 2/32, yield 0.65%. Straight ahead, it's Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
We're all in uncharted territory looking for ways to support our communities. At Dell Technologies, we're making sure small businesses have the right tech solutions. Dell Technologies advisors are here for you, helping small businesses stay connected and productive while working remotely with Windows 10 Pro and Microsoft Teams. We're standing by you every step of the way. Call us today on 0800 169 1745. That's 0800 169 1745.
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
It's hard enough to forecast where the economy is going to be going over the next several months or quarters. Forecasting where potential output will be in the next several years is even harder.
This is not your father's or even your grandfather's IMF.
The most we can hope for, I think, out of D.C. is a pumping of the brakes and slowing down action on U.S.-China escalation.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz.
From New York City, for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance with equity futures on another planet. We're live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Farrell, together with Lisa Abramowitz. This is Bloomberg. And Tom, I've got to say, I really struggle to think of a time when this equity market was more detached from the mood of this country.
It's no question about that, and I guess it's no surprise. We've seen it many, many times before, John. We see it with a little bit of dollar churn today, but you're absolutely correct. And, of course, we've ebbed and away just in the last 2 hours or so. The events over the weekend, John, are absolutely extraordinary, and they are original and unique versus other times of unrest in this nation.
And the events of the week to come will be extraordinary as well. Tom, it's remarkable to see the tension in this country and see an equity market that is totally unchanged at 7 a.m. Eastern, 2 hours and 30 minutes away from the opening bell. And as we count people down to that payrolls report this coming Friday, Tom, we're approaching 20% on unemployment too.
I'm glad you bring that up, John. My recalculation here over the weekend from research notes is 17 to 18% unemployment, and then they model out above that other countable people who get you out to 21 to 22% unemployment. And as Francine mentioned, the McKinsey report in the last hour, John, among black Americans, unemployment could be well above 30%.
Lisa, a tense weekend behind us and an important week still to come.
Yeah, there's a tension right now between improving economic data and the backdrop that's really bleak of rising unemployment rates that have decimated certain communities in U.S. Tom we're talking about. What I'm looking at today, we're going to be getting ISM manufacturing data at 10 a.m. Wall Street time. People looking for any signs of improvement underneath that. Then, of course, there's the ECB coming out on Thursday, expected to expand their bond purchasing program as well as their efforts to stimulate the economy. And Friday is that pivotal U.S. jobs report for the month of May, an expected unemployment rate of 20%. And this is not independent of what we're seeing in terms of the tensions that are boiling over. I think Mark Zandi over at Moody's really put it the way. I think people are coming to the realization that their jobs may not be coming back or coming back quickly. This is all conflating with racial tensions and completely boiling over. It was a very difficult weekend, and it's going to be a very difficult few weeks going forward, John.
Tom, put it all together, it's absolutely remarkable, and thank you, Lisa. Unemployment approaching 20% this coming Friday, the relationship between China and the United States breaking down, and real tensions, historical tensions, deeply rooted in American history coming to the surface once again. And S&P 500 futures are totally unchanged. We'll spend all morning talking about this on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio, but Tom, I have to say, it is quite remarkable.
Well, it's quite remarkable to see the market, but I'm going to say this again, John. I've seen this disconnect between finance and investment over social unrest and the social good of the nation. What will be far more importantly, and I know, John, we've got a whole series of guests up to inform on this, and hopefully in a Bloomberg way where we're not as strident as some of the other networks. But I think, John, what is so important here to understand, it's the leadership forward in the political space that then maybe will affect in upon the markets.
It's a familiar feeling over the last several months where it's almost embarrassing to quote equity futures on a morning like this. I've said that so many times over the last several months. We can start the conversations this morning with Kevin Cirilli down in Washington, D.C. Kevin, will we hear from the President of the United States today?
Yes, and in fact, the president is going to be meeting with Attorney General William Barr later this morning in the 10 o'clock hour, Jonathan, and then we'll have a teleconference call with governors from around the country and national security officials from around the country as America wakes up to scenes of unrest and, unfortunately, riots that played out from Boston to Santa Monica. Here in Washington, D.C., just outside of the White House, where the riots really erupted, and there were several clashes with Secret Service agents as well as police officials. Like other cities, the mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, imposing a curfew of 11 p.m. last night. Unclear if that's going to continue for tonight, though it is expected. I spoke with a senior source yesterday on Joe Biden's presidential campaign and asked how the Biden campaign would be dealing with this. And what this source told me, Jonathan, was that he is going to likely continue to be making appearances at peaceful protests and at the same time calling for there to be some type of criminal justice reform, significant reform. You'll think back to the conversations that we've had right here on this program about economic stimulus over the next couple of weeks. I'm told that the next vehicle that could come through is now very likely going to have to include some type of reform to address the killing of George Floyd. This is a significant moment in civil rights history as well as a significant moment in American politics that is divorced entirely of the economic reality on Wall Street.
For our international audience here on TV and radio, and also, of course, for all of you waking up across this nation, the imagery of Lafayette Park north of the White House. Kevin, to be clear here, they turned the lights out at the White House for a security reason. There was unrest at Lafayette Park, but as you mentioned on civil rights, this is not 1968, way up 14th Street, Place U Street in Washington. What's the distinction that you observed in the unrest in Washington overnight versus other protests and riot we've seen?
You know, you mentioned 14th Street, a historic African-American, which has a very rich African-American history in the city of Washington, D.C. You cross town about a mile by the White House, go to the historic National Mall where the Washington Monument, the World War II Memorial, as well as other memorials, they have been graffitied. And the images of America's national monuments, historical monuments, where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, to see the graffiti of Black Lives Matter imprinted on those monuments is an image that no doubt will be remembered for years to come.
Kevin, so far the president has taken a pretty partisan approach in terms of his rhetoric, coming out with a series of tweets ranging with accusations against the media as well as Antifa, saying that he was going to designate it as a terrorist organization. Is there any pushback from Republicans saying that the president should take a page from the traditional playbook in this type of situation of taking a more bipartisan tone in terms of addressing the nation?
Yes, there is. And in fact, I spoke with several Republican staffers and including a re-election campaign official over the weekend who, quite frankly, I would describe their mood as uncomfortable, to put it mildly, with the response coming from the president. We saw this response after Charlottesville. Senator Marco Rubio, a Republican from Florida, in the last 24 hours, Lisa, tweeting out, and you mentioned Antifa, tweeting out that the riots and the looting and the fires that were set were carried out by, according to the senator's words, Antifa terrorists. This as the president, as you mentioned, tweeting out yesterday that Antifa he has labeled a terrorist organization. Susan Rice, who is an African-American and also the former President Barack Obama's national security advisor, speaking on CNN over the weekend and saying that she believes that there could be foreign adversaries, including Russia, that have fueled the the rioting aspect of these protests. She also said that she would be comfortable with labeling Antifa a terrorist organization. She is a prominent Democrat voice in Democratic national security circles. So I think I say all of this because I think that over the next 24 to 48 hours, it's going to be imperative on behalf of the administration and Democrats to get to a point to separate out the violence from the peaceful protests.
Kevin, always great to get your thoughts on this program. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Kevin Cirilli there on the events of the last weekend. And Tom, Kevin's right to draw a distinction between the peaceful protests across much of this country and the protests that in some places turned into riots, elements of which were largely attributed to the radical left-wing organization Antifa. And I use the word organization loosely because there is no centralized organization, which makes it difficult, really difficult to police. And I think a big question this morning is how Washington and White House specifically plans to do that, Tom.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see on that organization as well. Joining us now, Greg Brower, of course, former congressional staff member for the FBI. We're thrilled he could join us this morning. Greg, I want you to define for this America, for those listening coast to coast, the modern phrase law and order. It's not Richard Nixon's law and order. It's not George Wallace's law and order. It's not even LBJ's law and order. What does law and order mean in this 2020?
Well, what it should mean is an effective law enforcement that is constitutionally based and is community engaged and is very different from some of the examples that we've seen recently that have caused this protest activity. This is, to be sure, these are exceptions to the rule. These exceptions involving excessive force and unnecessary violence on the part of law enforcement. It is not; those incidents do not reflect law enforcement generally, but clearly there are enough examples of such conduct that it needs to be addressed in a way that it has not been addressed thus far. And we're seeing some high-profile recent incidents causing the kind of social unrest and protest activity that we've experienced over the weekend. And so clearly it's a problem, it's a serious issue, and it has to be addressed.
Well, Greg, let's talk about it, because I know this is something you've given a lot of thought to. How do we more effectively police the police? How do we do that, Greg?
Well, there has to be effective training, obviously. Clearly, recent examples tell us that the training has to be improved. It has to be better. It has to be more comprehensive in large departments and small police departments around the country. There also has to be more effective oversight, apparently, when incidents like the one we saw over last week in Minneapolis happen. There has to be robust investigative activity. There has to be robust oversight, and there has to be accountability. I think one thing that can happen is that the federal Department of Justice can, in the form of the DOJ Office of Inspector General, can perhaps play a bigger role in overseeing the way that DOJ grant money is spent by local departments, the way training is done. But there really obviously has to be a much more effective training and oversight and accountability. Those are the three things that I would focus on.
Greg, just real quick here, what's your sense of how close we are to truly spiraling out of control where we're going to need a heavier military response?
Well, this is a very alarming situation, to say the least. We have now more than half of our states that have imposed curfews and have deployed the National Guard. This is the most significant such effort in our country since 1968. And so it's the violence that is going on. You know, we have a sort of a combination here of legitimate protest activity for obvious reasons, but we also have a lot of opportunistic, mindless violence, graffiti, attacks on the media, et cetera, and that obviously is not tolerable, and so it's a very, very challenging situation for our political leaders at the federal, state, and local level right now, to be sure.
Greg, fantastic to get your thoughts on a programme. We'll have to have a longer conversation next time around. That was Greg Brauer there weighing in on the situation that has dominated the United States for much of the past week. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Influential. We're Cadent. Keeping you and our people safe is our main focus, and our vital work must continue. You'll start to see more of us in your area as we increase our work to upgrade the gas pipes to keep the energy flowing into your homes and businesses. We may need to come into your home to complete this work, but rest assured our engineers are following all government guidance on PPE and social distancing. We continue to provide the critical gas emergency service, and if you smell gas, call 0800 111 999. To all other key workers, we would like to say a big thank you from everyone at Cadent. Cadent, your gas network.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
It was maddening to think that anybody would destroy property, put our officers in danger, and put themselves in danger. And while we understand and protect their right to protest, not to destroy the city.
Mayor of Washington, D.C., Muriel Bowser, weighing in on some incredible events over the weekend in the United States of America. The mood of this country totally divorced from what we see in the price action through much of this Monday morning. Let's get to that price action right now. In your equity market, we're up 3 points on the S&P 500, positive 0.1%. Sometimes the price action just feels wrong, and it feels wrong this morning. In the bond market, 10-year Treasury yield shaping up as follows. A 10-year yield up a basis point to 0.66%. And in foreign exchange, the story for you. Across G10, a slightly weaker dollar, a slightly firmer euro. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz. This is Bloomberg Surveillance, live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. A remarkable set of events over the last week, Tom, and a market, I said it at the top of the program, a market that just feels like it's on another planet this morning.
Well, maybe economics, finance, investment, certainly finance and investment, John, a little bit removed, but we are going to continue forward with our coverage from Washington on the policies forward and, of course, across the nation with our First Word News. But we're also going to speak to experts on now what as we touch June 1st of this historic year. Michael Shaul has a wonderful historic perspective. He is with Marketfield Asset Management. Michael, the investment view forward from June 1 is radically different than it was from December 31. As you recalibrate for June, what is your number one theme?
I think we want to see whether or not some of the sort of strength in cyclicals that has started to appear in the last few weeks, can really be extended, and whether it can broaden into, we've had a lot of leadership from the precious metals, from gold. Looks like silver might finally be part of that. And what you'd really want to see is some of the traditional industrial metals beyond iron ore show signs of life. So that's what I'd look for at the beginning of June.
Michael, it is hard to be bullish for a whole host of reasons at the moment. How difficult is it for you to be constructive on this market?
Parts of it, it's quite difficult. I think that we're sort of back in heavy over enthusiasm for a lot of technology. But I do think that there's a good portion of the global equity market, mostly it's its cyclical portion, which is not expensive. And where, I think that just the sheer amount of liquidity, both at the level of money supply, but also at the level of fiscal injections, I think give you some hope going forward. It's clearly not the easiest time to be bullish. It's harder than, say, March 09 or May 09. But markets are strange things, and you throw a few $1 trillion their way, it does tend to have an effect on prices.
That's the issue, isn't it? Throwing a few $1 trillion the way of the market. And for a lot of people outside of Wall Street, this is the problem they have with what's going on in financial markets at the moment, Michael. It's the Federal Reserve that has thrown a whole lot of money at this situation. And at some point, it will reach the real economy. It just hits markets a whole lot quicker and disproportionately much more so. And my question to you is whether the Fed and the actions of the Fed over the last couple of months or so has divorced this market even more from what we see in the economy and from what we see over the weekend?
Well, I think the intention of the Fed was to divorce the market from economic reality. I mean, you did not want a credit market reacting to the sort of unemployment numbers that we saw. But I would make the point that it's been a combination of fiscal and monetary expansion this time around. If you look at the personal income numbers that came out on Friday, that really made that point. So to say, you've had a tremendous injection of cash into the personal sector, which is really only a short-term bridge at this point, combined with, I think, a much longer-lasting injection of monetary liquidity. I think the Fed will leave itself open to criticism from some parties, but there's, if you want to go back and look at what happens when the Federal Reserve does nothing in the face of a crisis, you go back to 1929 to 1932, and you see how helpful that is for the U.S. personal sector.
Michael, I'm wondering, just going forward, what kind of practical response there will be in markets to what we're seeing in terms of the riots, the looting that we saw in some stores. I'm looking at Walmart shares down more than 1%, Target down 2.4%. Is this going to have a protracted effect on the retail sector that does have brick and mortar exposure right now?
I doubt it. I think that you'd have to have a hell of a lot of looting to really affect the market cap of something like Walmart. But I think, again, what it does do is to bring into question the ability of major urban centers to bounce back. I've aired my views before, my negativity on commercial real estate in a city like New York, there were already multiple question marks over the ability of New York to bounce back and become what it was in January 2020. You throw in a lot of civil unrest, and it's an even harder hill to climb.
Michael Schill, thank you so much to the Market Field Asset Management. Great briefing. Greatly appreciate that this morning. There's no question this is an historic time for the nation. And frankly, the turmoil, John, you see in the United Kingdom and in other nations as well. And it's where the news, the calendar is so important. John, we've got Jobs Day on Friday, but much more before that, don't we?
Well, on the labour market, the expectation is unemployment climbs towards 20%, Tom, that we get a negative 8 million print. That's the median estimate in our survey. But I'd like to pick up on the words of Michael Shaul. The objective, the intention of the Federal Reserve was to divorce this market from the fundamentals, to help build a bridge to the other side. And in many ways, Tom, they have been successful. But that success is a double-edged sword. And the other side of that is the cause that the Federal Reserve stokes inequality and widening inequality. And I thought it was bold of the chairman to be diplomatic, to turn around last week and say that the actions of the Federal Reserve absolutely do not add to inequality, when the experience of the last 10 years suggests that maybe he's wrong.
Well, what's so important about this, John, it really is front and center, is does the unrest that we see, and frankly the unrest that's widely predicted, does that jumpstart that second, third, or fourth tranche of assistance from Washington? I mean, from Friday even, is there a changed policy prescription for Washington?
Well, I hope it sharpens the focus of Washington, D.C. on many fronts. I think it's remarkable, Tom, that we're hardly even talking about this. Some of the enhanced benefits of the last couple of months will be fading as we enter July. And I fail to see much urgency down in Washington at the moment to do something, to move to the next phase. The Federal Reserve is talking about the next phase. I think we need to hear about the next phase from the fiscal policymaker as well.
Well, lots more to come here, and not only here, but in Europe as well, the ECB, and much more. Of course, China front and center, we've barely mentioned this morning. John, why don't you take it out with a data check here on our simulcast?
Well, thanks for embarrassing me, because it's the equity market that's embarrassing us all this morning, completely detached from the mood of this country and from the mood of the world, as equity futures turn positive very briefly in the last 20 minutes or so. Up next on this program, we'll catch up with David Harrow of Harris International Associates on the path forward and on cyclical. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz, 2 hours away from the opening bell in New York after a week and a month of gains as well on the S&P 500. We advanced just a little bit on equity futures, up 2 points on the S&P 500. We advanced around about 0.1%. No risk aversion in this market, despite the events of the last weekend or so. In the bond market, Treasury set up as follows. Yields higher on a 10-year by 1 basis point to 0.66%. And in foreign exchange, just a little bit of dollar weakness through G10, Tom Keene. Euro dollar advancing by around about 0.1%.
Turn to the market, John, and a real risk-on, risk-off feel over the last number of days. Of VIX back out to 30 as well. As we speak to Markel Scholl, and we'll have much more forward on the unrest across this nation. Ambassador Haas scheduled to join us in the next hour. It is good to speak to David Harrow. He is one of the world's great international investors. That does well when international stocks does well and does less well when it is a struggle. And it has been a struggle. David, you are in the fabric of the Midwest. You're coming to us from Wisconsin today, and you're based out of Chicago. This unrest that we see, I know it doesn't affect your investment strategy. I know you're going to tell us that, but it colors the international tone. How does the unrest of America change international investment forward?
Well, it depends whether this becomes a permanent part of the fabric of our society, this unrest and this divisiveness. I think if it's just a passing storm, then it won't have any impact. If this divisiveness continues to elevate and persist, perhaps it will put a tiny little risk premium, all else equal, on U.S. equities. But, I do believe our country will get over this. This is something that I think the wrong people are taking advantage of what was a bad situation, and it brought out the worst in certain people, a certain small element. And I think we're going to get over this. We're a good country. The people here are basically inherently good people, and we'll get control of this, and this storm will pass.
We talked to the technology capitalism minister, Mrs. Vestager, of Brussels earlier this morning, and she is, many Americans would suggest, anti-tech. David, from where you stand in investment, American technology reigns supreme. Is it still a value?
I think in some places you could find reasonable prices in American tech, and specifically in Alphabet. In our global portfolios, we still have a large position in Alphabet because we believe if you mark-to-market cash and their assets and give them credit for some of the things they've been doing and investing, that it's still very much a value. It trades at or below the market multiple when you make those necessary valuation adjustments, and it really should trade well above the market multiple.
David, there's an argument about value coming back finally over growth, which has benefited most over the past few years. And this is something that you adhere to and have underperformed as a result of it. In your recent letter to the shareholders, you were apologetic about it. Why do you believe that's set to change?
Because I believe that businesses and stocks really are financial assets, and that the price of these financial assets is an important aspect what makes them attractive. If you could get certain businesses at a fraction of what they're worth being determined by their free cash flow streams. Again, this is the predication that we believe a company is valuable based on what it's able to generate in terms of free cash flow. And if you look at the prices some of these industrial businesses in particular are selling at, that price ultimately will matter. Well, price matters when you buy anything. Now, for a long while, almost the better part of a decade, price has taken a back seat. But when the dispersion between two classes of assets, we'll call them growth assets for lack of a better word, and value assets, reaches such a large level, you're bound to see a rebalancing, especially since when people start to get interested in value assets again, the door to get into these assets is very, very small because they've been so heavily sold. They're trading at very, very low market cap. So my argument is that I don't know exactly when this will happen, but when it does happen, you will see such a snapback because there's so little involvement in these assets today. And to me, this is one of the big opportunities in investing. We're all saying, well, the U.S. market is starting to look pricey, et cetera, et cetera. But then again, you could look at segments of the stock market, and especially if you were to look at my area, international value. I mean, this is probably the worst 4 or 5 months I've had in 34 years. And it's the companies aren't just falling apart and going bankrupt. A lot of these businesses are actually going to come out of this just fine and doing very well. And yet they're still down 30, 40, or 50% year to date. And to us, this really represents opportunity. If you could get quality business franchises selling at low single-digit price-to-cash flow multiples, businesses with good balance sheets and good cash flow streams, think of a Daimler or BMW in Germany, or some of the companies in the European financial sector like a BNP Paribas, or industrial businesses like a Glencore. If you could get these businesses this cheap, this is the time, in our view, to be buying them.
David, we got a taste of that last week in certain segments of this market, specifically the financials and specifically in Europe too. But some of that was largely a top-down story. I hope that European politicians got their act together and moved forward with fiscal stimulus and some form of debt mutualization as well. David, I guess my question for you, so someone who focuses much more on bottom-up, whether those trades in Europe that we got a flavour of performing last week, whether they depend on Europe getting its act together at a European level?
I don't know if Europe will ever get its act together, to be honest, because it's just almost impossible for them to do so. You have so many different agendas within the EU. It's hard to get any kind of a consensus. What I think will propel these and awaken these valuations is just through the economic recovery as people get back to work and as economies reopen. And I think this is the real story. Europe came into this a bit earlier. Remember Italy and Spain? Generally speaking, Europe came into this COVID-19 crisis a little earlier and shut down pretty hard. And they're kind of starting to open in many ways earlier. I mean, you see Italy's opening today and almost completely opening. And the German kids went back to school, I think, in April. And so you're beginning to see normalization that will be the light at the end of this dark economic tunnel. And that, to me, is what will awaken some of these value stories as it becomes evident that these companies made it through the storm. Now, the icing on the cake will be if the European Union could ever get their act together, and if, for instance, the Europeans and the British could ever decide on a trade agreement. This will be icing on the cake. Both of these have some potential, but I think that these things are not needed for this recovery to really take off. What's needed for the stock market recovery in Europe to take off is for the economies to reopen and the light at the end of the economic tunnel. And I think that will be enough to shine some light on these values that I've been talking about.
David, just real quick here, I'm wondering how much your outlook for Europe depends on its relationship with China remaining at least where it is now and not deteriorating further amid a backdrop of rising U.S.-China tensions and sort of pressure that they take some sort of stance here.
Yeah, this is an important question because the Europeans, as well as the Americans, Europe is a big exporting nation. Germany, Italy, France, they're big exporting nations, and one of their big exporting clients is China, as well as the U.S. and as well as the U.K. And so these economic relationships, the stability of these economic relationships are going to be important, as these economies recover. So I do think that is an important factor to watch. The U.S. actually, it's a little bit less so. The U.S. is actually a little less dependent on China for its exports. Certain sectors are very dependent. If you look at like Boeing as an example, and the egg sector. But for the most part, I think the exports that are most at risk for a destabilized China, the Europeans, this is something you have to watch.
David Harrell, thank you so much. With Harris Associates, thrilled that he could be with us today. Guys, what I want to do in the simulcast, we welcome all of you on Bloomberg Radio in Washington and Boston, New York, early morning on the West Coast on Sirius XM. All of you listening digitally at home, we say good morning on our simulcast. John, I think we've really failed at talking about China today and the news flow. Is the trade deal dead, John? I think it is.
It's not dead, but it's breaking. It's cracking. And we see it a little bit more fragile in the last couple of weeks or so. Our reports this morning, Tom, suggesting that Chinese officials have instructed various state-owned ag companies to suspend imports of American farm goods over the last week, Tom. And that's seen against a backdrop where China and the United States and relationships between the two countries are quite clearly breaking down. So I would say the phase one deal is still alive for now, but it's very much on life support, Tom. Some clear breaks in the last couple of weeks.
And the life support here, Lisa, I mean, this is the last thing the northern Midwest farm community needed, right?
Yeah, this is coming at a bad time, and it has been a bad bunch of years due to droughts and a variety of different issues that have hit the farming sector. I find it interesting that U.S. equities respond much more to a growing U.S.-China tension than anything like the unrest that we saw over the weekend, and yet they're bouncing back from the earlier declines if you look at U.S. futures. I'm trying to understand when the markets will even take this seriously, right? I mean, John, I'm just wondering, it seems divorced from everything going on, the action that we're seeing in markets, whether it's tensions abroad or tensions here.
Lisa, I mean, over the last hour, what were the lows? We were down by what? A couple of tenths of 1%. It's hardly responded to that either.
Yeah.
The words from the President of the United States on Friday were really strong. I think it lacked the substance that some people feared or expected, whatever side you stand on that particular debate right now. But it is remarkable, nevertheless, and we keep coming back to this, to see equity futures this Monday morning in positive territory. It doesn't matter to what degree they're in positive territory, just to see them there in the green of 4 points and up a tenth of 1%. It's just absolutely remarkable. We'll continue this conversation. We'll get the latest from Hong Kong next on the program, and a little bit later we'll be joined by Richard Haas as well. In your equity market, we are positive this morning. Good morning to you all from New York City. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz. This is Bloomberg Surveillance, and we're live on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, thank you very much. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot says there will be an overnight curfew after peaceful protesting over the death of George Floyd devolved into criminal conduct. At least 6 people were shot, one fatally over the weekend amid protest and looting in downtown Chicago. Minneapolis Police Chief Medaria Arredondo came to the scene of the incident at East 38th Street and Chicago Avenue last night to pay his respects to the late George Floyd. He spoke directly to the Floyd family.
I would say to the Floyd family that I'm absolutely devastatingly sorry for their loss. And if I could do anything to bring Mr. Floyd back, I would move heaven and earth to do that. So I'm very sorry.
Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms addressed the 5 Atlanta police officers who were seen in a video using excessive force and tasering 2 college students in their car downtown Saturday night. The encounter was recorded and the decision was made by the Atlanta police to fire several of the officers involved.
After review of that footage, Chief Shields and I have made the determination that 2 of the officers involved in the incident last night will be terminated immediately.
The other 3 officers have been placed on desk duty. The 2 students have been released. 2 American astronauts boarded the International Space Station from a SpaceX capsule over the weekend. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, this is Global News, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. Ice Cube's Big 3 basketball league has sued Quinn Emanuel in New York State court, alleging the law firm acted as a spy for Qatar's business interests while representing the league in a dispute with a former executive. Big 3 has been in a long-running dispute with Qatari investors, alleging that their interest in the 3-on-3 basketball league was a political charm offensive aimed at influencing U.S. policy toward Qatar. Brown University is revamping its sports program and cutting varsity sports teams as the school seeks to contend with earning just 2.8% of titles in the Ivy League over the last decade. The Providence, Rhode Island school says the changes don't relate to the pandemic, but date back to a review which found that the high number of varsity sports at Brown was a barrier to competitiveness. Varsity teams will be reduced from 38 to 29. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift.
At Asda, we've provided 3,500 care homes with priority access to delivery slots, and priority shopping hours are open to our care workers. We're also donating 250,000 face masks to care homes. Asda, we're all in this together. Please show ID for priority shopping. Check asda.com for times.
We're all in uncharted territory looking for ways to support our communities. At Dell Technologies, we're making sure small businesses have the right tech solutions. Dell Technologies advisors are here for you, helping small businesses stay connected and productive while working remotely with Windows 10 Pro and Microsoft Teams. We're standing by you every step of the way. Call us today on 0800 169 1745. That's 0800 169 1745.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Hi, this is Mike Tirico, introducing you to Sports Uncovered, the newest podcast series from the storytellers at NBC Sports that will shine a fresh light on the most unforgettable moments in sport.
The reason why I'm smiling, I might get in trouble for this.
Search Sports Uncovered to start listening today.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
The second quarter numbers, when they come out, are going to be very, very negative numbers. I mean, we know that. We know that that was the height of the shutdown when there was no activity. In the third quarter and fourth quarter, we're going to see activity begin to emerge.
Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester speaking to Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio in this past week. The next meeting, June 10th for the Federal Reserve. It comes up later next week. Look out for that full coverage, of course, right here on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz. Let's get you some price action. 1 hour and around about 42 minutes away from the opening bell, with equity futures positive just a single point on the S&P 500. Outside of that, not much price action to speak of this Monday morning. Treasury yields higher by around about a basis point, a 10-year to 0.66%. In foreign exchange, we've talked about this a few times already through this morning. The dollar is weaker, the euro is firmer by 0.1%. Front and centre, Tom, we touched on it just briefly 10 minutes ago, the relationship between China and the United States, domestic issues here in the United States, and a Chinese Communist Party that has its own view of how things are playing out in America as well.
Well, not only in America, but in Hong Kong as well. Let us go to Hong Kong. John Endacura joins us, Endacura, I should say, with a very clear view of the economics and the politics of his Hong Kong and how it relates to Beijing. And we spoke earlier this morning with the acclaimed historian Stephen Tsang of SOAS in England, and he made very clear this is a forever changed Hong Kong. Did the people protest this weekend, and will they protest into June?
I think there's a sense of a waiting game at the moment, Tom, because we're waiting on two things now. First of all, the exact details of the national security law that Beijing will send down to Hong Kong, and that could take some weeks or months. And in the meantime, we do have some key milestones, key anniversaries that the protest movement are likely to commemorate. Today, for example, we've already had a cancellation of the annual June 4 Tiananmen commemoration, so we'll have to see how the weeks go after that in terms of momentum. But on the other side, remember, we have to wait and see how the U.S. responds. The President Trump gave a hawkish speech on Friday, but he stopped short of specifics when it came to what he would do to Hong Kong. He has power over all angles, all facets of the relationship here, from passports to air travel to trade. So a lot depends on what exact wording Beijing comes down with the national security law, and of course what the U.S. chooses to do either before or after then in terms of its own retaliation.
And how do the protests over the weekend, the riots over the weekend here in the United States, how are they playing out in mainland China today?
Oh, I think they're obviously using it as an opportunity to strike back at the U.S. I mean, that's no surprise that the more hawkish aspects of the Chinese foreign ministry would use this. In fact, they've been quite active on Twitter, trolling some key U.S. lawmakers and key U.S. opinion makers on this, making the point that the U.S. was preaching one thing about the protests and the democracy movement in Hong Kong, and now, of course, they've got their own problems at home with their own growing protest movement. But I think, you know, the issue with both of these sets of protests, be it Hong Kong or the U.S., is that it adds to an ever-increasingly fragile global picture. Fragile geopolitically between the U.S. and China, fragile now domestically, obviously, in the U.S., and, of course, how that plays out and how it impacts the election will also have a significant bearing on the broader U.S.-China relationship going forward, too.
And I'm wondering what the message is from Beijing, given the fact that they've gone ahead with this controversial passing of a proposal with respect to Hong Kong, and now the news that Bloomberg is reporting that China is instructing some of their agricultural importers to avoid importing from the United States. Is the message that they believe the U.S. to be hobbled by the coronavirus and too distracted to be able to respond in full?
I think there's some of that, Lisa, for sure. I mean, there's no doubt that they decided to drive through their plans and signal that they will impose a national security law on Hong, despite knowing the fact that it would draw criticism from the U.S. So there's no doubt that they are seizing the moment to do that. In terms of the trade deal, again, the news that we've had tonight about the big state-owned agricultural purchase, putting a pause on those purchases with the U.S., it speaks to the idea that there is a lot of fragility around that trade agreement at the moment. Remember, even apart from the politics, China had agreed to buy U.S. farm goods this year worth about $37 billion for 2020. A lot of economists said that was going to be very difficult to achieve. Anyway, they only managed to buy about $3.4 billion in the first quarter. So it could be that we're now starting to see the trade agreement as well get sucked into these broader trade tensions between the U.S. and China, because until now, actually, the trade agreement had been kept off the table, but perhaps now it's back in play.
And The unemployment rate in Hong Kong is 4.2%, 4.3%, whatever. That seems impossible. What's the end to current unemployment rate of Hong Kong?
Well, remember that typically speaking, a lot of East Asia economies do have quite low unemployment rates. There are a lot of workers in the workforce here who might do more menial tasks, and there's cheaper labour, which brings down the headline rate, don't forget. But at the same time, Tom, it is creeping higher, and it's especially creeping higher in the food and beverages sector and in the retail sector. That part of the Hong Kong economy has been hollowed out, and every day we hear tales of hotels and shop fronts letting go of staff. So I think that it does remain low relative to other big finance hubs around the world, but it is going higher, and I think most economists would say it will continue to push much higher over the coming months and into the year end too.
Ender, great to catch up with you. Ender Curran there, out of Hong Kong, weighing in on the situation between the United States and China, and the situation playing out in Hong Kong too. Tom Keane, you asked about unemployment in Hong Kong. Much harder to get an idea, a clear read on the labour market on the mainland, and I think that's the real struggle right now. The depth of the downturn is clear to everyone. You shut an economy down, things shut down, the economy rolls over. As we reopen, gauging the scale of the recovery, I think, is the important challenge at the moment, as these economies, not just China, reopen across the world.
Yeah, and it's not only that, John, but it's parsing service sector recovery versus goods producing and manufacturing recovery. There's a huge mystery of that. I would note Tim Cook's comments over the weekend on the protests in America. And you've got to wonder how Apple Computers, just as one example, sees the recovery in China. For them, it's absolutely key.
Yeah, you can gear up manufacturing very quickly. Who have you got to sell to? A little bit later this morning, Lisa, I know you're watching this. We get the PMIs in America. We've had them out of China over the weekend. The United States, I think, 9:45, then ISM's come out at 10 Eastern.
Yeah, and one thing people are looking at is below the headline numbers, how much their inventories have been driven down and how much their orders have picked up. These are the sort of aspects that we're going to be watching. John, you have to think things have to get better from some of the lows. The question is whether the pace can be continued at a time of unrest, and a question of whether or not the extra stimulus is going to come online.
A big focus on the politics, on the data through the week right here on Bloomberg Surveillance as we count you down to the opening bell, 95 minutes away from the opening bell in New York City this morning. Good morning to you all. Equity futures on the screen, on my screen, on the S&P 500, dead flat as we go into the opening bell. Next up on this program, we'll catch up with Richard Haas and get his thoughts on events in Hong Kong. From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance, live on Bloomberg TV and on radio. This is Bloomberg.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunningham to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Shaquille O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
It's hard to imagine that we'd see a quick V-shaped recovery. I think it's going to be slow.
The most we can hope for, I think, out of DC is a pumping of the brakes and slowing down action on U.S.-China escalation.
It's hard enough to forecast where the economy is going to be going over the next several months or quarters. Forecasting what potential output will be in the next several years is even harder.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene, our simulcast to you across this nation and around the world. We say good morning on Bloomberg Radio, on Bloomberg Television as well. Exceptionally good guest this hour, and we'll begin with Ambassador Haas here in a moment. But just an extraordinary place that we're in right now, and of course, waking up to the imagery of a darkened White House, a president choosing not to speak to the nation, as was anticipated last night, and to the north across Lafayette Park, a boarded up Hay Adams, and across the street from the Hay Adams, a modest fire, but nevertheless a fire in the historic St. John's Episcopal Church. It is the Church of the Presidents, where pew 54 is where they sit, although Lincoln, John Farrell, sat quietly in the back. John, with great respect to the protest of continental Europe, the difference in the way they protest in the United Kingdom. John, your thoughts on this violent weekend?
I don't think anyone needs my personal thoughts, not from a shouted journalist that's barely left his apartment for the last 3 months, and I'm not sure there's much value in comparing what takes place in Europe to the United States. There is a deep-rooted history in America that is coming to the surface once again. What I see in the equity market this morning, which I think we're more qualified to talk about, is just an uncomfortable calm. Really unsettling to see an equity market emotionless against the backdrop of the mood of the weekend, Tom.
In the uncomfortable calm, beautifully done. I'm going to steal that from you, John, all through the day. The uncomfortable calm absolutely nails it. Lisa, the uncomfortable calm is also in the fixed income space. It has been surreal for 9 weeks, 10 weeks, all of this aid by institutions, including the Fed. What do you read, Lisa, about the calm of the bond market as we begin June?
Well, the money is going to where the Fed is buying, and the Fed is absolutely supporting this. And there's a real uncomfortable calm, to borrow John's term, with respect to the bid into more speculative grade credit contrasted with the rising bankruptcies and expected bankruptcies to come. I want to go back to something John was talking about earlier, and that is how much does the Fed contribute to income inequality? They were saying, we don't think we do. And without a doubt, if they hadn't done anything, Tom, it would have been pretty potentially catastrophic for the economy. That said, the fact of the uncomfortable calm in markets is leaving people with more assets, with more wealth, and leaving other people behind. And I do think that this is going to be a theme that we're going to keep hearing about, Tom.
We're going to set you up for the week today as well. Before we get to Ambassador Haas, John Vero, very quickly, without question, the hallmark report of the week will be that Friday jobs report. How do you frame the unemployment rate now and the other statistical dynamics within that report?
Ugly, Tom. Just approaching the estimates and looking at them very quickly. We're approaching 20% on unemployment in America. Underneath the surface, you'll look to wages, but that's going to tell a very distorted picture of what's actually happening in the labour market. Negative 8 million could be the print this coming Friday as well. That's your median estimate. This market, and I borrowed that phrase, I think, from Claudio Borio at the Bank of International Settlements many quarters ago, that uncomfortable calm. This market is very focused on the cyclical recovery as we reopen. But it is still unsettling to see the events of the weekend do absolutely nothing to shape risk appetite or investor appetite whatsoever on a morning like this morning.
We're thrilled to bring you right now on Bloomberg Surveillance, Richard Haas. He is Oberlin 73, which means he and I have the memories of the tumult of the late Vietnam War. And far more important than that, Ambassador Haas, you and I have crystal clear memories of the riots of 67, 68. I go back to the Rochester riots of 1964 with very clear memories of that. Richard Haas, how is this different from what you and I remember of our youth?
It is different, Tom, and it's different in worrisome ways. Yes, you have the rioting and the looting against a backdrop of injustice. In 68, you had some awful things, obviously, in terms of the assassinations and the rest. In 70, you had Kent State. What I think is different about this, though, is what you were just discussing. It's the backdrop of a public health crisis that's claimed the lives of well over 100,000 Americans, and we don't know how many more coming down the road, and against, 25% unemployment. So it's this combination of physical threat, economic threat, and now political division and violence. And it's the combination of the three has got to have people worried about where this country is and where it's heading.
You and I remember the speech of LBJ on a Sunday evening years and years ago. It was widely presumed we would see the president speak last night. He and advisors chose not to. What would you recommend as the next step for President Trump?
Well, it seems to me he should only speak if he's got something that's healing and reassuring, and talks about not just Mr. Floyd, but essentially the lessons that need to be learned, in essence, the lessons that need to be applied about policing. He also needs to address public health concerns, economic concerns. Essentially, he has to step up to the moment, stop the divisive tweets, stop the personal attacks. Essentially, he should only speak if he's willing and able to rise to the occasion. But if he wants to use the occasion for political purposes, or to deflect or to attack, then essentially less is more, and he should continue to stay inside the White House.
I'm wondering if you pair what we're seeing in terms of domestic unrest with the idea that President Trump withdrew from the WHO on Friday, something that absolutely has been evaporated from the news cycle. I'm just wondering if you can pair domestic unrest with U.S. isolationism. How does that sort of feedback onto the United States, the leader in the world?
Well, what you're seeing in the world is the United States is essentially abdicating. We haven't been pushed out of our traditional leadership role of the last 75 years. We have unilaterally taken ourselves out of it. We've withdrawn from more agreements, more arrangements, more institutions than I can count. So you've got that abdication of leadership, but on top of that now you have the demonstration effect, the example we're setting to the world of incompetence and ineptness in dealing with the pandemic. We're seeing this violence. We're seeing this violent police activity, as well as violence on the part of some of those who are protesting. So a big part of foreign policy is, or put another way, leadership has two dimensions. One is what your diplomats do, and what the president has basically said, we're going to withdraw. And the other part of leadership is the example you set. And this is hardly an example any society in the world would want to emulate. So this is really about as bad as it gets.
Ambassador Haas, fantastic to have you with us. I haven't got through the whole of the new book, The World, an introduction just yet. But if there is a chapter in there on hegemonic power, have we ever had a reluctant hegemon, a hegemon that just steps away?
No, funnily enough, one of my previous books, many books ago, was called The Reluctant Sheriff. And I used the phrase to describe a previous president, but it applies much more to this one. And no, I can't find a historical example of a leading country in the world that voluntarily stepped down, not because of circumstances, but because of choice. When a country like Britain was forced to back off its leadership role, essentially it was forced. It simply didn't have the capacity, the resources anymore. It was too small of a country to sustain that role. But this is voluntary. And what's so worrisome to me, it's not as though we're stepping back, having put something better in its place. To again use a parallel to the domestic situation, it reminds me a little bit of the healthcare debate in this country, where we've repealed, but we've not replaced. And that's what I feel we've done in the world. We've repealed American leadership and the world order we helped bring about, but we've not put something as good, much less better in its place.
If we had to rebuild that, Richard, what shape would that take? Because there are a lot of people like yourself, and I'm not saying these are your thoughts, but others share them, that maybe the world pulls back into two spheres of influence, with China at the epicenter of one and the United States at the epicenter of another. Is that something you can see happening? And what kind of institutions do we need to think about to actually see that happen, see that come around?
Well, I wouldn't want to see it happen by any means, because China, to me, represents a model I would hardly want to see spread widely in terms of its authoritarianism at home, and given its much of its modern history. Now, is it possible? Yes, I think a more likely alternative to a U.S.-led world is a nobody-led world, where a world of greater unraveling, of greater violence, of a greater gap between global challenges and responses. What I'd like to see is not a unilateral American effort, but real leadership, which implies followership. The United States working with others, and by the way, including China, to deal with everything from proliferation to terrorism to climate change to public health, to regulate the behavior in cyberspace, and so on and so on. That, to me, is going to define the 21st century, and I would just say that after 2 decades, we are not off to a good start.
Just real quick here, as the distractions mount with respect to U.S.-China trade tensions and domestic unrest, what's the increasing risk of some sort of infiltration by bad actors to the United States that go undetected?
Well, we probably already had infiltration through cyberspace. I think that's the biggest one. Could terrorists take advantage of this? Conceivably. I'm more worried about some global event, whether, one could even argue some of what the Chinese are doing in Hong Kong is an attempt to exploit the moment. But I worry whether it's North Korea, Iran, Russia, China, who knows. Some country, some entity might try to take advantage of the fact that the United States is distracted. We are, divided politically, and they may say this is an opportunity, this is a moment. So that is something I actually think we need to be vigilant about.
Ambassador Haas, always fantastic to catch up with you, sir, of the Council on Foreign Relations, and of course the author of The World, a brief introduction. And Tom, speaking of making an impact and having an impact, let's talk about the election that's coming up in November, where the former Vice President Joe Biden can make an impact. Where is he on this issue? Why is he not more prominent over the weekend and into this week?
I've asked that question, John, in my early morning hours 3 times today, and I'll go to Matt Bennett, who helped President Clinton, William Clinton, years ago, and that it's just not the right time. I'm with you, John. I don't buy it. I just, in these absolutely unique times, I've been thunderstruck at the lack of visibility of the vice president. Full disclosure.
Turning to the equity market, equity futures are positive by 2 points to the S&P 500, up around about 0.1%. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Together with Lisa Abramowitz, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, thank you very much. Protests were held in cities across the nation over the death of a Minneapolis black man in police custody. Early this morning in Manhattan's Soho neighborhood, mobs of people looted numerous shops, steel merchandise, including high-end retailers. Minneapolis Police Chief Medaria Arredondo went to the scene where George Floyd was killed. He spoke on why he decided to fire the 4 officers so quickly.
There are absolute truths in life. We need air to breathe. The killing of Mr. Floyd was an absolute truth that it was wrong. And so it did not I did not need days or weeks or months or processes or bureaucracies to tell me that what occurred out here last Monday, it was wrong.
2 Atlanta police officers fired after a traffic stop during a protest occurred after 2 college students in a car were stopped by police. They were tasered and dragged from the vehicle. All of it was recorded. Atlanta's mayor says it was disturbing on many levels. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says that she kind of ignores President Trump's controversial comments on the nationwide protests. Health experts are concerned the protests erupting across the nation and law enforcement response will spread the coronavirus. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Influential conversations from... With the shift to remote working, video conferencing has become the new normal to keep your business running. But is it reliable and secure? Cisco WebEx is committed to the highest security standards and already trusted by both small businesses and many of the world's largest organizations. Call, message and meet securely with Cisco WebEx. Sign up at cisco.uk/work-from-home. When secure remote work is critical, WebEx is essential.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Emma,
the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
Hong Kong is going to get squeezed, and on the back of this, you're going to see more demonstrations and more violence, and the Chinese government will suppress it. And that means the middle class and the business class in Hong Kong will be less robust.
Ian Bremer of the Eurasia Group on the situation in Hong Kong and the tension between the United States and China. You could throw a dart on a map of the world at the moment and you'd find some tension pretty much everywhere. In this market, you won't find much tension. 1 hour and 13 minutes away from the opening bell. Equities unchanged on the S&P 500. Outside of that, in the bond market, Treasury yields on a 10-year, your yield up by around about a basis point and change to 0.66%. Call it 0.67. And in foreign exchange, touching on the story of the last couple of weeks, actually, the dollar weaker, the euro stronger, euro dollar up by 0.1%, and some outperformance on the Aussie. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz, with a key week ahead. Not just politically speaking, Tom, but the data front and centre as well. And it concludes with Payrolls Friday.
It's going to be amazing, John. I know you want to talk to our next guest about PMI and some of those dynamics that we talk about. Right now, folks, Ethan Harris with us, and we welcome all of you on radio and television worldwide, head of economic research for Bank of America. And Dr. Harris, I want to go back to your book on Ben Bernanke of ages and ages ago, because I believe, Ethan Harris, in your book, there was somewhat conventional economics. That is out the door. If you were to write a book right now on Jay Powell's Fed, how would you tackle the conventional economics of the moment?
The super crisis playbook playing out. I mean, it's not completely new. I mean, we saw the Fed kind of experiment with some incredibly radical policies back in 2008, 2009. But the Powell's kind of taken that to a new level, and it's crisis management. It's not totally unprecedented, but the scale here is something we've never seen before.
Ethan, so let's talk about the data that we already have been seeing. Goldman Sachs actually upgrading their expectation for stocks and saying that the jobless data actually confirms a view that is more optimistic than they were previously expecting. Are we seeing something that resembles more of a V-shaped economy, recovery in the economy than people had previously accounted for?
I don't think so. I think that, listen, we're going to bounce off some awful numbers here. So the unemployment rate, we think this week hits 19%. That is obviously partly temporary due to the shutdowns, and that data is already a couple weeks old. So we're going to see the unemployment rate come back down again, but where's it going to come down to? It's going to probably be above 10% at year end, which is where we were at the worst of the 2008-2009 recession. So, a V-shaped recovery. This is a funny V where the left-hand side plunges, and on the right-hand side you go halfway up. And so I don't think we're seeing V-shaped numbers right now.
The market, Ethan, just focused on the sequential improvement as you go from shutdown to reopening. And as you point out, we're still not quite focused enough, I don't think, on the limits of this recovery. The hope is there. A lot of people look to the soft data as a leading indicator for how quickly this economy might be reopening and normalizing. And Ethan, I know you've done a lot of work on this with the team at Bank of America, so I want to explore it with you with a little bit more detail. Why are the PMIs so flawed right now? Why are they less useful than they once were?
Well, let's think about what a PMI is. You're asking an executive at a firm to tell you whether activity was up or down this month. So let's say that activity collapses in a month, and so they record that it's collapsed, and you get a PMI that's very low, 20 or 30, because many different executives are saying activity fell. But then let's say you don't recover at all, and activity is flat in the following month. Well, the PMI will go back to 50 because they're saying activity is flat at these very depressed levels. So people will look at the data and they'll see we went from like 52 down to 30, and now we're back to close to 50. That's a V. It's not a V. A V means you go above 50, which means that you're starting to recover, that you're starting to see growth that offsets the collapse. So I think that there's been a tendency to kind of miss the fact that we have to look at the 50 level. That's a flat economy. flat economies after a collapse is an L-shaped recovery, not a V-shaped recovery.
Ethan, this is really important as we gauge and digest the data in the coming weeks and months. Begs the question, what's the best data point to follow? What are the team following? The high-frequency data, what are you guys looking at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's the New York Fed has a nice indicator that kind of takes the 10 high-frequency numbers and creates a weekly index, and that indicator has fallen sharply and has a very slight recovery. It's got claims and other daily and weekly statistics in there. That's a pretty good number, and I do think that some of the Google mobility data is useful. Numbers that kind of measure whether people are going to the train station or not, whether they're going to retail shops or not. And all of these indicators are showing that we're starting to move off the bottom here, but at a very kind of slow pace. And I guess I shouldn't forget, we also have some good data from Bank of America on our credit card and debit spending data that also can capture these trends.
That was the plug.
Yeah.
Nice to get that in there, Dr. Harris. I'm good. Mr. Moynihan, I hope you heard that this morning from the good Dr. Harris. Ethan, one more question quickly, if we could. We all understand the Gini coefficient's not good. We understand the inequalities of America. Give us your interpretation of the dynamics of that inequality right now.
Well, I mean, we were in a good phase here late in the cycle until the COVID hit, where the weaker parts of the labor market were recovering. You're finally getting some wage growth. You're bringing in people, and when you work, you learn and you become better and build your resume. That was happening, and so the inequality issue is actually starting to improve slightly. The COVID crisis has been really bad because it's putting out of work a lot of lower income workers in the service sector and so on. And so the shock is very disproportionately hitting low income workers, minorities, and other disadvantaged groups. So it's been a blow to what was the beginning of some progress.
Ethan Harris of Bank of America. Ethan, really appreciate your time. Send my best to the team. Some fantastic work over the last several weeks on this pandemic we're all working through. And Tom, I think Ethan touches on the heart of the issue right now. There is a clear difference between the improvement you see as you go from shutdown to reopening to focusing on the limits of that recovery. And I sound like a broken record because I've brought this up so many times, but it seems to me that a lot of people are focused on the sequential improvement and not the limits of the recovery. How quickly, how much can we normalize?
Absolutely correct on the level as well. And so, okay, you get an improvement in unemployment, but if the level goes back to 12% in any other economy, that's totally unacceptable.
Double-digit unemployment going into 2021 is considered totally unacceptable, yet economists like Ethan Harris think that might be where we are. Coming up next on this program, we'll talk the bond market. Rob Waldner of Invesco will be joining us from New York City this morning. Good morning. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed, retrieve data fast. Scalability, grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity, easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just...
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance. For our audience worldwide, we're live on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tom Keene. I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramovich, counting you down to the opening bell, 1 hour away, with equity futures just slightly lower, down 3 points on the S&P 500. We are negative around about 0.1% at 30.39 on the S&P 500. In the bond market, Treasury yields with a little bit of a lift. The curve just a little bit steeper here, up 4 basis points on a 30-year, up 2 basis points on 10s, and up just a single basis point on a 2-year yield. Your 10-year maturity, that yield 0.67%. And as we've been talking about for much of the last couple of weeks, the dollar is weaker once again, with the euro firmer by 0.1%. The dollar, Tom, weaker against everything in G10.
Yeah, the dollar weaker too, and the safe havens off. It'll be really interesting to see through June, John, what the safe havens do, depending on which way the market goes as well. And again, so much of that has to do with fixed income. It's something that is a bit off the radar with the international relations and the political news that's out there, and of course a stupendous rebound in the stock market. Rob Waldner is with Invesco. He is their fixed income strategist of note, and he joins us now. Rob, is total return just gone? I can't figure out class to class in fixed income. Am I clipping a coupon, or can I actually invest for fixed income total return?
Well, Tom, thanks for having me this morning. So, in fixed income, the government bonds certainly have a very low or negative yield. Much of the government bonds have negative yields, which talking about income, that's not going to get you much. But outside of the government market, there are yields to be had. You can invest both for coupon and in some situations for capital gain. So our strategy has been largely to concentrate on buying fixed income assets that were quality and that the Fed was purchasing. So that would be investment grade bonds, particularly inside 5 years. We think are a very safe investment in this environment.
Loans have been a challenge. There was this phrase called leverage loans, which John Farrow, the host of The Real Yield, understands. I don't. Lisa Bramowitz, the host of Everything Fixed Income, understands leverage loans. Rob Waldner, I don't. Would you explain how leverage loans have done in this debacle?
Well, Tom, leverage loans are, that's referring to loans that are made, basically syndicated, that are to lower quality companies, but are generally secured. So generally have some sort of security to them. They have some sort of collateral that back them up or some sort of assets. So in this environment where you had this sudden stop in the economy and a sudden credit demand, loans suffered a sell-off, as you would expect for a asset class which is related to lower quality companies. But as the economy recovers, it's a very idiosyncratic asset class, and that as the economy recovers, some of these companies are going to do very well, and their loans should do well. But that's not to say there won't be some companies that struggle.
This is a Tom Keene strategy to plead ignorance so he can try and highlight the fact that Invesco is a huge loan shop. Was that the strategy here, Tom, to pretend that you don't know what a leverage loan actually
more
is
subtle.
As you speak to Invesco?
I was trying to be subtle about it, unlike you.
You are about as subtle as a brick through a window, and I think we all know that. Rob Waldner, let's talk about how subtle people were into this downturn and how defensive they were as well. How defensive were people going into this downturn, and what's that contributed to, Rob?
Well, this is a very great question, Jonathan. Very interesting, because we just released our 2019 investor survey, where we talked to 159 investors worldwide that control over 20 trillion of assets. And one of the conclusions from that, and this is at the end of last year, but one of the conclusions of that survey was investors were very cautious. These were particularly fixed income investors, but they are investors that had assets across the spectrum of asset classes, and they largely expected that we were at the end of the cycle, and they were investing very cautiously. And that piece of data, I think, is a very interesting piece of data to let us understand how things are evolving in the market now, which is, I think, we believe that the market is tracking a little bit ahead of, if you like, the virus and the economic outcomes. And I think we talked about that in your last segment. There's two reasons for that in our view. One is that the investors were very cautious. So they were in a much better position to manage through this. And so they don't have as many risky assets to sell at this point, if you like. The other thing is policy, of course. We could talk more about policy, but policy has been a big boost.
Policy, meaning the Federal Reserve throwing the bazooka, the kitchen sink, and everything else toward the market. I'm just wondering how divorced, though, some of the valuations are getting from fundamentals. Yes, investors had the capacity to go risk on, but will the Fed backstop them to the degree that currently is being priced into credit markets?
Well, policy, it's the Fed, one, who have thrown, as you say, the big bazooka. But two, fiscal policy, it's quite extraordinary what we've done in the United States from fiscal policy. So our deficit will be, 19% of GDP this year. We saw in the income and spending data that we got last week, I think the savings rate is now at 33%. So when you think about your typical economic slowdown and then recovery, you don't typically see this kind of behavior. You don't see this evolution around savings rate, income, et cetera, where there's really been income support put out there for people. So there is some powder out there that I think is supporting, from a policy perspective, that's supporting the market.
And yet you still have S&P Global coming out and predicting that the corporate default rate will rise to 12.5% by March of next year from 3.5% of this past March. Is that adequately priced in?
The high yield market, which you're referring to, where those defaults will largely be, is pricing in default rates somewhat close to And you have to really look at this sector by sector. So if you look where a lot of the defaults will be in certain troubled sectors, like energy, for instance, and in those sectors you do see that we're pricing very much for defaults in a lot of these sectors that are the troubled sectors. On the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, investment grade, we've seen a tremendous retracement. So that we've seen the biggest retracement from the wides in the investment grade sector, outside of agency mortgages, and that sector, is very fundamentally solid. And we think that the policy is supporting that sector.
Rob Waldner, what is your take, with all your experience at Invesco, on long duration bonds? The uproars in full faith and credit out to 20 years, and the debate out to 30 and 50 years as well. But give us the new view on the advantages or disadvantages of long-term maturity.
Tom, as we see, the U.S. is now issuing some longer bonds. We issued 20-year bonds, and we would anticipate that probably as we get more supply out in the yield curve and as we get a recovery, we would probably start to see a little bit more steepness in the long end over the next year or two, and that steepness would be, I think, is probably necessary to attract that longer term capital.
Rob Waldner of Invesco. Rob, great to catch up with you, sir. Thanks for joining us on camera too. We appreciate your time this morning on some important issues in this fixed income market. Lisa touched on it. The presence of the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Chair Powell, and everything the Federal Reserve has done over the last few months, Tom, has been totally unprecedented. And I want to go back to something that the chairman said to close out last week, which is that the Federal Reserve absolutely does not contribute towards inequality. And I think we all have to take issue with that and not simply ignore it. That is one hell of a statement from the chairman of the Federal Reserve, when we know through the experience of the last 10 years that if you have assets, they went up. Who has assets? That's a very simple question to answer. I would also add that I think the Federal Reserve has the best of intentions, Tom. I think they have the best of intentions, but that doesn't mean the outcome does not absolutely contribute to widening inequality. That is simply not true.
I think you said it delicately, and I thought that you and Michael McKeon, speaking with Ms. Mester of Cleveland, touched on that as well. I mean, I see a lot of pushback from our guest, John, that we have not nationalized the bond market, and I just don't buy it. I observe that we're in the process of nationalizing our bond market. Now, maybe if we could say 5 or 10 years from now, it won't be, but we've nationalized it and put a bid under it, and you're right, that 110% benefits the haves, not upper decile, upper 1 percentile. John, it benefits the upper 20, 30 percentile of this nation.
We always compare it to an extreme, don't we? We find an extreme and say, well, it's nothing like the extreme, so therefore there is no problem. The extreme in this case, Lisa, would be the Bank of Japan and Japanese government bond markets. And certainly the Treasury market is nowhere near like the JGB market right now, and the Fed's presence in it is nothing like the BOJ's and things like equities too. But you can see the direction of travel, Lisa. And you've really got to start thinking about what the exit strategy looks like. I have no idea what the exit strategy looks like.
And frankly, the Fed doesn't really either, although they continue to say that they will have an exit strategy when the time comes. John, I want to go back to what you were saying, and that is that Fed policies do seem to widen the gap between the wealthy and the less wealthy. The question I have is, you're right to also point out that the measures were necessary so that the economy didn't completely tank. But does it take pressure off Washington to extend some of the unemployment benefits and take additional measures to support the economy that might have the opposite effect in breaching this gap? And that, I think, is a legitimate focus area, especially as the Federal Reserve continues to double down on their policies.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Lisa. That is the role of fiscal. And here's the big issue. The Federal Reserve tries to address things like employment, tries to help keep companies afloat, tries to keep credit markets open so they can fund themselves and keep the payroll up and running. I understand all of those things, but they do that through financial conditions. And what happens is it hits financial conditions and markets first and meets the economy much later, and disproportionately so. So what happens? Quite clearly, it helps markets more than it helps the real economy. That is just the downside that you have to accept when you do these kinds of policies. Where fiscal steps in, they can do direct to people. They can help people straight up into their bank accounts. And we saw that, Tom, in phase 1 of the fiscal package, and it's really missing phase 2.
Well,
what does the next effort look like? And all we've got at the moment is silence.
I would suggest the next effort came closer after what we've observed overnight in America. There's no question we've got to see some form of fiscal response, John.
Equity futures turning a little bit lower. We're down 7 points on the S&P 500, negative around about 0.25%. From New York City this morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, thank you very much. Violent demonstrations broke out in more than 100 cities nationwide, protesting the death of George Floyd, the black man who died after a white Minneapolis police officer kept his knee on his neck. The mayor of St. Paul, Melvin Carter, on ABC's Good Morning America, says he understands the anger but thinks violence is a misplacement of energy.
All of this activity, all of this action, all of this unrest, all of this destruction is taking our focus away from where it should rightfully be. We should be having a conversation in America that's centered on the fact that George Floyd ought to still be alive, that all 4 of those officers need to be held accountable.
A truck driver is in custody after he drove into demonstrators in Minneapolis. 2 of 5 Atlanta police officers have been fired after they were seen in a video Saturday night using excessive force and tasering 2 college students in their car. Atlanta Police Chief Erica Shields says the video is shocking and left them with no options.
And having spent most of the afternoon with the mayor reviewing the footage exhaustively, I knew that I had only one option, and that is to terminate the employees.
The other 3 officers have been placed on desk duty until further investigation. The 2 students have been released. Australian organizers, fearful of conflict, have canceled a peaceful protest planned for Sydney over Floyd's death. The rally organizers said today that the rally was canceled because others had threatened to create havoc and protest against the event. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Urban home sales are seeing a slowdown, especially luxury homes in places like Manhattan.
I think the high-end market has slowed down a bit, definitely the co-op market. I mean, that used to be booming, and we've definitely seen a slowdown.
And Beth Friedman, CEO at Brown Harris Stevens, says there is a lot of interest in getting out of the city right now.
What we've seen is a lot of people who have rushed to the Hamptons to rent, or if they have second homes there, they're there, or if they're in Rhinebeck, they're going to Rhinebeck, or some people have homes. A lot of the people who live in New York City have homes in other places. So they're going there. The question is, will there be people who decide they wish to not live here any longer?
A Zillow survey says office space and a dedicated home office is the #1 amenity people are looking for in a home right now, and listings mentioning home offices have jumped 10% since April. Some home builders are also reporting a tick-up in interest in the amenity. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Connecting decision makers to a network of...
At Moonpig, we've got making people happy down to a science. How? With flowers. Research shows that whether small blossoms or giant blooms, roses or peonies, receiving bouquets of any formation causes our bodies to produce endorphins, or the happy chemical.
Thank you, Professor. And you too can harness the power of flowers with Moonpig. It's easy.
Send a beautiful hand-tied bouquet of happiness straight from our app with just a couple of taps. Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the NFL.
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
We need to stand up as a nation with the black community, with all minority communities, and come together as one America. That's the challenge we face. The very soul of America is at stake. We must commit as a nation to pursue justice.
Former Vice President Joe Biden on a sensitive time in the United States of America. Alongside it, Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro, together with Lisa Abramowitz. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Live on Bloomberg Radio and on Bloomberg TV. Let me get through the price action for you very quickly as we count you down to the opening bell. 42 minutes away. Equities just turned a little bit lower, down 6 points on the S&P 500, negative 0.2%. In the bond market, Treasuries as follows. Yields higher, the curve steeper. Your 10-year yield 0.68%, up 2 or 3 basis points on a session so far. And in foreign exchange, the euro advances, the dollar weaker against the bulk of G10, though we erased some of that in the last 20 minutes or so. A little bit later, guys, as I step away to get ready to the countdown to the Open on Bloomberg TV, I'll be catching up with Michael Gapin at Barclays. And Tom, I think we have to focus a whole lot more on this labour market, who it has hit disproportionately in the last few months. The labour market is ugly. It is more ugly for others. And we will talk about that payrolls report still to come this coming Friday, Tom.
We'll have special coverage into the ADP report on Wednesday. Claims many under 2 million for that terrible number on Thursday. And then the May jobs report seen Friday. We'll go beneath the headline data on television and radio at 8:30. Right now, an important conversation, and I would suggest maybe my most important conversation of the day on this horrific crisis in America. The news media has been on fire through the weekend, speaking about this, the uproar, the different views, but maybe it comes down to how a mayor speaks to his police chief and how a police chief speaks to his mayor to begin to quiet America and move constructively forward. The police chief of Flint, Michigan is Philip Hart, and he has to deal with the always handsome Sheldon Neely, who joins us now, the mayor of Flint, Michigan. Mr. Neely, my deepest sympathies. I believe you took over office 6-7 months ago. It has been from one crisis to another, hasn't it?
Yes, it's been very challenging, but through the grace of God, we have been diligent in making sure that we can provide the services that the residents need, and it has been nothing less than a blessing, Tom, for us to be in this position at this particular time. And so, but this community is no stranger to overcoming challenges, and we will continue to do so at a fabulous, fantastic rate. And so this is a time where we have to step up and show the rest of the country what this community is made of and give them a sense of hope. Yes, go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry.
I will take your point there, Mayor, that it's a long way from Buick City and a booming population of the 1960s. I want to know the conversation you're having with Phil Hart, your police chief, to quiet the streets of Flint.
Well, the conversation I'm not only having with our police chief, which is he's a kind-hearted man that understands service and duty, but the rank and file members, from our patrol officers to our sergeants to our captains and our lieutenants, we have to have one focused mind around unity. And a unity focus piece has to be about service to our residents and also to the common good of man. And so those are the things that resonate through any community. And with my police chief, Philip Hart, which has a broad array of experiences, from being a state trooper to a sheriff, now to a city municipal police chief, we can speak the language of unity, and that is the language that resonates to get us through these challenging times.
That's exactly where I wanted to go, Mayor Neely, because we've seen a number of mayors around the country struggle to hit the right tone, both expressing empathy with protesters, but also expressing support for police officers, saying they are needed in order to enforce law and order. What's the right balance when you hear a mayor discuss this? Where should the emphasis be? I understand unity, but beyond that.
Well, the emphasis should be on quality of life. Quality of issues and making sure we speak to those issues, residential, recreation, economics, education, and safety. And those issues are not black or white, rich or poor. Those are about quality of life for everyone, no matter what sector or stage in life that you are in. And when we have police officers to protect and serve, speaking those same type of things to those individuals and residents about quality of life and how we can enhance those things resonate well with the general public, and then a level of empathy, especially for the Floyd family, and we keep them lifted in prayer, and making sure that we understand the pain, and so it resonates all over the country and now outside the borders of the United States about what is happening and the tragedies that we are facing, pushing back against the dominant tendencies of a society that sometimes disqualifies people, and so we're speaking about elevating all of us.
Mayor, I'm wondering what it's like as a leader of a city to be struggling in order to combat both social unrest or difficulties that the community is feeling, along with financial difficulties that necessitate some pretty difficult choices, whether it be laying off essential workers, raising taxes, or further cuts. What do you do as the leader of a city, especially in this type of scenario?
Well, we have to inspire hope and hope for one another and continue to do it. And Lisa, you described it pretty well. I sometimes I describe a community we have a crisis on top of a crisis with a side of crisis, and so what we have to do is continue to extend the hand of help and say that we're going to get to the other side, and then just continue to lead them, and it'll be a lighthouse of hope so we can get to the shores of the other side of this crisis that we're currently facing with COVID-19 still is amongst us. We're probably halfway through this crisis, and then we have another crisis of conscience with law enforcement, what we saw and witnessed what happened in Minnesota with George Floyd. And so we continue to do that, and we still have an ongoing water crisis here in this community as well. And so the only thing we can do, Tom and Lisa, is to continue to inspire residents and seeing that we're moving forward, but we can only do so moving together, and that is the spirit of unity that we have to bring to the table.
Mayor Neely, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg Surveillance today. We look forward to speaking to you again. Sheldon Neely of Flint, Michigan. Lisa, what's extraordinary here when you look at the battleground states is what kind of Democrat will show up in November. Again, there's all the news flow in that, but Lisa, the real focus to me is, does Joe Biden run to the center and those Midwest center Democrats, or does he run a far more liberal campaign? And that's to be decided.
Well, and that's part of the reason why, to your point, he wasn't as present as perhaps some people were expecting. He's trying to toggle the line of not being seen as going against President Trump and the law and order type of platform, while also expressing incredible empathy for the protesters. It's a very difficult line to toggle between.
Absolutely. There's no question about that. To review the equity markets, green on the screen this morning, and then really quite negative. And as John mentioned, we've pretty much flatlined. I see futures at -6, Dow futures -26. Importantly, we did get a 30 print on the VIX, a little bit of agitation, as you would expect, given the politics of the nation. Stay with us worldwide. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought...
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB?
On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Braden and Jared Carabas cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the NFL.
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective Podcast.
What about Giannis Antetokounmpo? He is going to be eligible to sign a Supermax extension, which we were projecting to be worth $240 million this summer. Well, if the salary cap drops, and even if he's wonderfully happy in Milwaukee, it may make no sense for him to sign when he can just wait a year and wait for the revenues to recover and then lock in.
Subscribe to Brian Windhorst and the Hoop Collective. Search the Hoop Collective to listen.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
Certainly, we've got to put a floor under the economic carnage.
Markets didn't believe the coronavirus would take down the world economy.
Finance.
The sellers are not necessarily finished, but quite exhausted.
Investment.
That's the reality that we have to settle ourselves to. This is the start of a depression.
We're going to have a bounce back when everything is open. The question is, what is the shape of the economy from there?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Monday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. As if the pandemic was not bad enough, social unrest around the country over the weekend heightens tensions across the board even more. Yet the markets appear fairly calm this morning, with equity futures down just slightly. However, the volatility index, better known as the VIX, is up 2 full points to just under 30, suggesting that there is some angst building in the market. To get the latest on pre-market trading in the equity market, let's go to Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at?
Well, Paul, you mentioned the unrest related to the death of George Floyd last week. And one company that's being affected directly by the protests is Target. The shares are down 2.5%. The discount retailer is temporarily closing or reducing hours at about 200 stores in response to protests. And bear in mind, Target is based in Minneapolis, where Floyd died. It's closed 32 stores in that area alone. Moving on to healthcare. Pfizer's down 6.5%. Final stage study data showed the drug maker's breast cancer medicine Ibrance failed to help patients at an early stage of the disease. Abbott Labs is down 3%. The healthcare supplier was cut to sell from neutral at Goldman Sachs. The firm said investors were overestimating the size of the market for the company's COVID-19 tests, whose accuracy has been criticized. Eli Lilly, on the other hand, marginally higher in early trading, up about 0.25%. The drug maker started giving patients a proposed antibody treatment for COVID-19 in an early stage study. Now, Lilly's working on the drug with a closely held Canadian company, Celera Biologics. On the deal front, you have Coty up 8.5%. The beauty product maker agreed to sell a 60% stake in its Wella and Clairol professional brands to private equity firm KKR. The deal values the units at $4.3 billion. And Coty chairman Peter Harf is returning as CEO. He filled that role from 1993 through 2001. Then you have Zynga up 2.5%. The maker of Words with Friends and other mobile phone games agreed to buy the maker of Toon Blast and Toy Blast. The deal for Turkey's Peak, that's the company, is valued at $1.8 billion in cash and stock. NetEase is down up 2%. The Chinese mobile game maker is selling shares in Hong Kong for the first time. The sale is part of a global offering that may raise about $2.6 billion. That's based on Friday's closing price for the company's American depository receipts. Allogene Therapeutics, on the other hand, down 6%. The cancer drug developer is selling $450 million of stock. The sale follows an 85% surge in Allogene's share price this year. And one more for you, Paul. Gap is up 3.5%. The apparel retailer is raised to neutral from the equivalent of sell at J.P. Morgan. The firm cited Gap's plunge of about 70% since the rating was cut to sell back in October 2018.
Nice call by J.P. Morgan there, calling that 75% move. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Well, one of the things that consumers have had to change in the face of this pandemic is how they do their banking on a day-to-day basis. Most branches are closed, forcing more and more people to go online, download some of those apps, and even some of the older folks out there are making a transition fairly well. To get a sense of how that's all playing out, we welcome Arthur Levitt, former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission and a Bloomberg LP board member. So thanks so much for joining us. So it appears that more and more people are, in fact, taking their banking online.
It does look that way. Specifically, over the past 2 months, Americans flock to websites and apps to manage their finances. And J.P. Morgan, for instance, they had their online clients use offerings much more frequently. And the Bank of America found that older customers are seeking more and more of its digital services. What's happened is that some people's eyes have been opened to the future. This is just a relentless push. The virus has given a boost to digital banking, which obviously entails less paper and greater use of electronic services and fewer in-person meetings. In April, for instance, 20% of the new logins to Bank of America's online and mobile products were by seniors and boomers. And that also accounted for about 20% of customers who deposited checks using mobile phones for the first time. So the use of technology has risen over the last 6 weeks to levels that the bank projected would take 6 years.
Arthur, all this is great, and I think we're all living it, to be honest. I mean, everybody in their own way is living it. What does it mean for the too big to fail banks? There's a basic national feeling they can't get bigger But if they have the best systems that people want, should they get bigger, or how do we avoid them getting bigger? I mean, what's your experience here on the size of Bank of America or JP Morgan and the rest?
I think that the danger to the economy at these levels of the banks getting bigger is not great in my judgment. I think that the banks have had adequate warnings and have spent just so much money to improve their technology. This is the world of technology that has never before existed to the extent that it is available to take on almost any surge of business.
When you were a kid at the Levitt house, did they have toasters? Did your parents come home with toasters from the bank?
We had an ice box. How about that?
You had an ice box?
They used to come and bring a big chunk of ice to put in the ice box. And our toilets had pull chains instead of the ordinary flushing we see today.
And Paul, his savings deposit, young Artie Levitt, his savings deposit, which was $5.72, had an actual real yield.
That's right, as opposed to today where we might be paying the banks. Arthur, does this raise the question of whether, banks can and should maybe reduce their branch footprint if more and more people are doing more and more of their banking online, and that may even include now some older customers, that some of these banks can maybe even reduce their footprint of branches?
I think they're doing that. I think that's actually begun. I think that the explosive growth of branches is behind us. I think that technology has made it imperative for banks to save costs by reducing their footprint in terms of real estate and in terms of staffing and oversight that is necessary for a massive branch network of any kind. I think that's largely history.
Even in my town, though, in my little town, there's a branch on every single corner. They're all over the place. It just doesn't feel like they're reducing the footprint here, but I can't imagine there's much traffic going through there, Tom.
Well, I think we're going to have to see. I think to Chairman Levitt's comments, time marches on, and it's going to be interesting to see not only the battle, but who the victors are 10 years from now. Arthur Levitt is a former chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission and, of course, a board member with Bloomberg LP. Bloomberg Surveillance this morning brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Cohn Resnick can help your business mitigate disruption and mobilize for the future. Visit their coronavirus resource center today, cohnresnick.com/COVID-19. Paul?
Right now, let's get some world and national headlines. Tom, let's go to Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Tom. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot says there will be an overnight curfew after peaceful protesting over the death of George Floyd devolved into criminal conduct. At least 6 people were shot, one fatally over the weekend amid protests and looting in downtown Chicago. Minneapolis Police Chief Medaria Arredondo came to the scene of the incident at East 38th Street and Chicago Avenue last night to pay his respects to the late George Floyd. He spoke directly to the Floyd family.
I would say to the Floyd family that I'm absolutely devastatingly sorry for their loss. And if I could do anything to bring Mr. Floyd back, I would move heaven and earth to do that. So I'm very sorry.
Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms addressed the 5 Atlanta police officers that were seen in a video using excessive force and tasering 2 college students in their car in the downtown area Saturday night. The encounter was recorded, and the decision was made by the Atlanta police to fire several of the officers involved.
After review of that footage, Chief Shields and I have made the determination that 2 of the officers involved in the incident last night will be terminated immediately.
The other 3 officers have been placed on desk duty. The 2 students have been released. 2 American astronauts boarded the International Space Station from a SpaceX capsule over the weekend. It marks the first time humans have traveled to orbit on a commercially developed craft. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. Michael Barr, this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thanks so much. An extraordinary weekend in America. Just the imagery this morning of Washington, D.C., the White House, and across from Lafayette Park to St. John's Church was just absolutely extraordinary, Paul. And as John Farrell mentioned earlier, it's just amazing how the market is detached from this. We almost want the market to be attached to our political science, our political economics, but it's not, Paul, is it?
It isn't, Tom. I was just, the way I kind of phrased it this morning at the opening, calm. The market just feels calm right here. We have the S&P and the Dow down, just about 0.3%. A little bit of a pickup in the VIX, Tom, a couple of points there. But generally, given what occurred over the weekend, and it's not, it's the pandemic, which maybe the market's become inured to, but boy, the civil and social unrest across the country, it's something we haven't seen in a very long time, maybe the late 60s, Tom. You tell me. But if starting to feel a little bit like that, yet the market, again, showing some calm here in this pre-market trading.
Yeah, we were talking with Richard Haas this morning, of course, his wonderful new book out, The World on International Relations, and he and I were talking about our memories, high school, and even back before that, of the riots and protests of another time and place. And some of the equivalencies are there, but I'll tell you, Paul, it's a whole different thing. And, of course, the exhaustion that we see in the economy. And, Paul, the exhaustion of this critical week, and we're hoping that everyone will stay with us through the week on this American labor economy. To me, that is, the numbers are numbing into the weekend reading, Paul.
They really are, Tom, and I think, we're starting to see more and more states really focus on reopening. I know we're expected to hear something from New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy today about reopening, maybe the next step there. We've seen movements across New York State and, of course, lots of other states. So the country is beginning to reopen, Tom, and we'll see how that balance goes between the economic benefits of reopening versus perhaps the healthcare risks.
Futures up away. Yeah, futures up away here, Paul. Futures -9, Dow futures negative 68. Paul, I noted the VIX out to 30.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tom. It's it's a little bit of a feel about a little bit of uncertainty in the market. But again, you put it in the context of what's happening over the weekend. It's just remarkable here. So again, we'll focus on the economics, we'll focus on the finance, we'll focus on the business and the markets here as we try to get this market open for you for this week. This is Bloomberg.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband, Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up-to-date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Influential Conversations from Bloomberg Television.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30K a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures are slumping this morning as some fresh trade frictions with China overshadow signs of economic recovery from the coronavirus pandemic. Contracts on the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ 100 dipped after Chinese government officials told agricultural companies to pause purchases of some U.S. farm goods, including soybeans. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg, with S&P futures down about 10 points, Dow futures down 73, NASDAQ futures down 46. The DAX in Germany, there's no trading there today. The FTSE 100 is up 0.7%. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 seconds, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil is down 2.5% on 91 cents at $34.59 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.6% or $10.50 at $17.4120 an ounce. The euro 1.1104 against the dollar, and the yen is at 107.74. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene on a Monday. Challenging weekend for the nation, to say the least, and we'll be with you through the day on the politics of America and, of course, our focus on economics, finance, and investment. Part of our focus has been on this pandemic. We've spoken to all sorts of people worldwide on the virus, on COVID, and of course we spent much time with people from the Johns Hopkins University. A conversation this morning with Joshua Sharfstein.
We know that kids are less likely to get severe disease immediately, and they may be less likely to get sick in the first place. There's new evidence that kids have far fewer of the receptors that bind the coronavirus than adults do. At the same time, we're becoming aware of this rare inflammatory condition that can happen a couple weeks or a few weeks after infection that can be quite severe and even cause death. So it looks like it's a generally speaking mild disease, but there is a rare risk of a very severe complication. Schools that open have to be careful. It can't look like school did before the pandemic. They have to separate out the classes, keep kids with smaller groups of other kids, protect teachers, and probably prepare for a combination of online and in-person learning.
Josh, even if children don't actually get sick themselves, can they transmit the disease? Again, I've seen varying reports saying it's more difficult to transmit it, and others saying they transmit it just like adults.
I think, generally speaking, they definitely can transmit it. It may be less frequently transmitted than adults because they're less likely to be coughing and sneezing and really sick, but they definitely can transmit it. So you have to imagine that there's some families, if there are very vulnerable people at home, that are going to be very nervous about sending their kids to school, and that's understandable. So I think most places are going to be offering an online option in that case. Same for teachers who may be particularly vulnerable, older teachers with chronic illness. May not be a good idea for them to be the first to return to the classroom.
Is this a blood vessel disease or is it a respiratory disease?
Well, there's definitely increasing evidence that the virus can invade the blood vessels. The same receptor I was talking about before exists on the cells that line the blood vessels, and when those cells get disrupted, you get change in the environment for blood, and that can cause clotting. And we know that clotting is a major problem with coronavirus disease, and that's both big clots, which can clog catheters, and little clots, which cause the purple toes and other kinds of adverse problems, including heart attacks potentially and strokes. So clotting seems to be a big problem, and that could well be because of the blood vessels.
Joshua Sharfstein, the Johns Hopkins University. Paul, we got 8 ways to go here.
Sure. We're
going to talk, I believe, in a bit on Washington and, of course, this extremely difficult weekend. Paul, can we talk about the markets?
Let's do that.
And I don't say it lightly, folks. Paul, I was setting up for TV in the early morning with Francine, and there wasn't one, there wasn't two. There were 3 sirens out the window, and they weren't ambulances going to Mount Sinai, the virus. It's shocking, folks, to hear.
Yeah, it really is, Tom. And it's, again, this is a country, we've been in lockdown for 10 plus weeks. I'm sure people are just kind of going a little bit of stir crazy to varying degrees. And then you have some of the events that we've seen over the last several days in Minneapolis. And it just kind of all boiled over for this country here. And now it's a question of kind of where we go from here. And begin that healing process and the understanding and the discussion and trying to get to a better place. And I think that's where most Americans are looking to go right here. But you look at the markets here again, Tom, and again, a little bit of red on the screen. You were off about just under 0.4% on the S&P and the Dow, about 0.5% on NASDAQ. So I kind of feel like that's a calm Monday morning. It's a calm reaction to what was anything but calm over the weekend.
People look at their accounts, and whatever you did, folks, if you were brilliant like Paul and you got out of the market at the right time and loaded the boat, double leveraged in March, but they're like me in cash. But the people that participated, Paul, have seen a very nice rebound across all equity sectors. And it's not that they're back to even, they're not, but they've made back a lot of lost ground.
They really have. I mean, the market's up, I guess, over 37% off of that bottom we saw in March there. So a significant retracement. And as we talk to a lot of these strategists, Tom, and economists, it's clear that part of the support there and the bounce back in the market has been monetary policy. Just the Federal Reserve stepping in early, stepping in aggressively, stepping in repeatedly to support liquidity in the marketplace. And then you follow that up, Tom, with some pretty aggressive fiscal stimulus as well, and the expectation that more is to come. You've got a Federal Reserve saying we still have more tools in our toolbox. We're not done yet. And so that's kind of providing the term I found most appropriate is a backstop to the market here, a backstop to risk. And whether that's the right thing or not, that's clearly what the Federal Reserve is looking to do. And central banks around the world, Tom, it's not just the Fed. But clearly that backstop mentality is certainly in the marketplace here. And the question is, are we going to get a really ugly Q2 GDP print? We know that. But then how about the back half of the year?
Well, the back half of the year, but also, Paul, I really haven't seen anything on this, folks, in the shock of not only the weekend's affairs, but into early Monday morning in Washington and some of the other cities around the nation. Paul, I've got to believe that these events speed up the next tranche of fiscal solution. I'm saying that in a very general statement without, pro experience on the Washington dynamic. You just got to believe this will be a catalyst for more action.
You would think so. The first rounds of stimulus were generally bipartisan. This round that they're discussing that originated out of the House, not so much so, Tom. So I think there's clearly some politics creeping into this latest discussion of fiscal stimulus. The question is, for example, how much do states and local municipalities get as opposed to consumers and or business? So there's some politics coming into this round, but I think the expectation, even after the weekend, Tom, is that more is needed here.
We'll see. Futures a little bit negative here with the VIX back out to a 30 level as well across safe haven assets. A calm and a quiet in the market with much more, including reports from Washington. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stock.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment. Feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow, along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney. And the opening bell is brought to you by SEI. Challenges highlight one's character, partnership, and resilience. At SEI, they act as one community with their clients. Go to SEIC.com/banks. Right now, the S&P 500 is lower. At the open, it's down about 0.4% or 11 points at 3032. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.4% or 100 points at 25,288. And the Nasdaq's down 0.25% or 23 23 points at 94.68. 10-year Treasury down 7/30 seconds, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil is down 2.9% at $1.04 at $34.43 a barrel. COMEX gold is down about 0.5% or $7.90 at $17.4360 an ounce. The euro 1.1117 against the dollar. The yen at 107.73. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Karen. Greatly appreciate that and those data checks today. With a broader view of the market, and this, of course, coming off the platform of wonderful Deutsche Bank economics, I can't convey enough, folks, how Deutsche Bank got appropriately gloomy early and looked very correct as so much of consensus caught up with their caution on the economy, on unemployment. Torsten Slok and the team in America. Alan Ruskin has had to synthesize their international strategy, and he joins us now with Deutsche Bank. Alan, what is your lead idea on a Monday morning as you speak to Deutsche Bank clients on this Monday? What's a single thought you have?
Well, the question I've been asked most is why is risk so positive, really, in the face of what we're seeing in terms of, obviously, the riots, but there's the medium-term data that's obviously been terrible as well. And I think the answer to that is that most people feel on the social issues, particularly on the riots, that consumer confidence and manufacturing confidence will maybe take a hit, but it's usually a hit in days rather than weeks, and therefore there is likely to still be some improvement in the data going forward. And that's what the market's really focused on, is just looking at, short-term data is going to improve just as the lockdowns, shift and we come out of hibernation, as it were. And, the market's positive because of that.
So, Alan, let's go to that kind of that economic backdrop there as you think about kind of markets and kind of what they might be discounting. What's the thought in Deutsche Bank as these lockdowns start to loosen? How do you guys expect the economy to look over the next several quarters?
Well, the anticipation is that we're not going back to the old normal. There will be a new normal, and that the actual levels of GDP, levels for growth indicators will be meaningfully lower than when we started with the virus episode. So we're not going to retain or actually establish new highs probably until 2022, a long way out. So this is going to be what amounts to a very, very sharp descent followed by a relatively slow recovery. When we talk about actual growth rates, I mean, you're talking, in the orders of down 7%-ish for this year still. Q3 will look okay in quarter-on-quarter terms, but it's not going to look healthy in terms of year-on-year terms. So, I think it just depends what you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on the growth rates, the change, or do you want to focus on the levels? The levels are going to look awful. The growth rates will look okay. Right. And net, it's not great, I think, for the markets long term.
Alan, we spoke earlier to David Harrow of Harris Associates. He's on the buy side, an acclaimed investor in International. When International does well, he roars. And as he admitted, Alan, it's just been a very difficult 4 months for Mr. Harrow. How do you observe international equity investment? People just wait and wait and wait for it to go. What will be the Ruskin catalyst that'll finally make international equity investment go?
If you're saying go down, because it's certainly been going up and recovering quite sharply, I think it really needs a few things. One is either a sort of virus second wave, such that the improvement that we're likely to see in the next couple of months is truncated and we start to see slippage in the economic data, or alternatively that you do see sufficient build-up in bankruptcies, non-performing loans, and then financial dislocation in general, and that financial element then curtails risk. I think those are the main stories out there. It's possible, of course, that U.S. and China, the tiff that is going on, that's really a long-term story, could be problematic as well. But I don't think that's going to be the catalyst. I think it's either virus or financial dislocation.
So, Alan, where are some areas around the globe that you're looking for right now for some potential attractive value? We've had a big run-up in the U.S. equity markets, for example, suggesting that valuations are approaching some pretty rich levels. Where are you finding value?
Yeah, I think everything is ultimately still going to take its tack off the U.S. side. So I think it's hard to just establish and say, okay, there's clear value anywhere, really. I mean, if you look at, current P ratios, even in Europe, you're talking about Ps in the order of about, close to 20 currently. And as you go further out, I think for next fiscal year, it's, 17, 18 for Euro stocks. So there's no obvious sense of value in the orthodox way. I think the main element you have to say is, you've got the central banks on your side. You've got yields close to zero. Can you just establish P ratios that are much higher than you would ever have had in the past? And I think that's the dilemma that investors face. But there's no value based on short-term metrics.
I mean, okay, the value conundrum right now is great. I mean, Alan, just as a general statement and as an international strategy, do you tilt to growth or do you tilt to value?
Right now, I think you can't fight it. You can't fight the forces of the central bank. But you know that you're playing with fire. This is a short-term strategy, and it's one that could be upended, and it could be upended by the unpredictable. And the unpredictable, most obviously, is the virus. I think more than the financial dislocation side that I alluded to earlier, because I think the central banks can put a patchwork up there, and the central banks are really just trying to build a bridge. They're trying to say, look here, until the worst effects of the virus are over, we're going to build this bridge. But they can only build a bridge so far, 3 to 6 months, maybe. Beyond 6 months, I think we've got some very big problems.
But Alan, this is absolutely critical. We had 07, 08, we're going to do this, and we promise at some point we'll take the punch bowl away. They never did. It just kept going in different tranches, different ways. I get all that rationalization. Why will this time be any different? And that they've established these policies, it's made assets elevate, reflate, I guess would be the dangerous word to use. Why will they take that? Why do we presume they'll take that away again?
Tom, I don't think they're going to be able to take it away. So I think we're unfortunately stuck in this game. It's a practice of modern monetary theory where the central banks effectively are financing these massive fiscal deficits, really, in unprecedented fashion, which would not be sustainable without the central bank's balance sheets. And as you say, the repercussion is essentially to inflate asset prices, and that's the way it works at the moment.
How sustainable is that, Alan? I mean, I hear people talk about modern monetary policy. Tom and I try to put it on the back burner as much as we can, but here it is in a certain degree. Is there a reasonable thought, analysis, research that you've seen about how long this can really last?
Look, I think one thing for sure is that if asset inflation turns to goods inflation, the inflation that we typically think of as inflation, CPI-related inflation, deflator-related inflation. If we see that, then the central banks are going to have a very, very hard time in holding down yields. And so real inflation, which they seem to be trying to achieve, would, I think, seriously undermine their policies, because you get a backup in bond yields and all hell is going to break loose, really. So they're trying to control everything at the same time at the moment. But that control will not persist if you do see goods inflation.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. But Alan, the question is, you or Torsten Slok, do you actually see a successful reflation? Where in the history books have we seen that? I mean, is it there? Did I miss it?
Well, we're not really into the history books yet, to the extent that this is a totally new game in town. We typically will see some assets go up to reflect what is seen as a inflationary element or reflationary element. Gold is the most obvious thing that's benefiting in a sense in this world. But no, I think if you have a situation which we could be building to, I wouldn't say that's the central view, where you've got supply chains breaking down and global disinflation also taking hold and now shifting now to maybe some elements which are more inflationary on the global side, and then you compound this with monetary reflation, then I think we've got some issues. I would say one additional point, Tom, is we are seeing something different from 2008. We are seeing wider money supply growth picking up. And if wider money supply picks up, then there's more chance of actual inflation picking up. But if this is not the problem we have right now. For the next 12 to 24 months, disinflation is the issue. We're talking about an issue that could come up on the inflation side in, say, 3 years' time.
Alan, thank you. Just brilliant. Alan Ruskin with us with Deutsche Bank, their chief international strategist. Just always valuable. On this Monday, with our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom. Paul, the attorney for George Floyd's family, is set to announce findings today of an independent autopsy about the death of George Floyd a week ago after a Minneapolis police officer held his knee on his neck for several minutes. Floyd, a black man who was in handcuffs at the time, died after the white officer ignored bystander shouts to get off him and Floyd's cries that he couldn't breathe. His death, captured on citizen video, sparked days of protest in Minneapolis that have spread to cities around America. Early this morning in Manhattan's Soho neighborhood, mobs of people looted numerous shops to steal merchandise, including high-end retailers. Minneapolis Police Chief Madaria Arredondo went to the scene where George Floyd had died. He spoke on why he decided to fire the four officers so quickly.
There are absolute truths in life. We need air to breathe. The killing of Mr. Floyd was an absolute truth that it was wrong. And so it did not I did not need days or weeks or months or processes or bureaucracies to tell me that what occurred out here last Monday, it was wrong.
Two Atlanta police officers fired after a traffic stop during a protest, after two college students in a car were stopped by police and they were tasered and dragged from the vehicle. All of it was recorded. Atlanta's mayor says it was disturbing on many levels. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says that she kind of ignores President Trump's controversial comments on the nationwide protests. Pelosi also praised former President Barack Obama's recent statement on the unrest and said she thinks Trump should unify, not divide the country. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Greatly appreciated this morning. Let me do a data check. I'm going to race through this, but nevertheless, we are open with a Dow negative 73. Let me give you those Monday levels. 25,310. SPX over 3,000. 3,041 down 3 points. I'm going to call it fractionally lower on all. NASDAQ red on the screen as well. The VIX, we had a 30 print earlier, right now 29.67, back two big figures on the VIX as well. Looking at the bond market, yields a little bit higher here fractionally. I don't want to oversell that. 0.67% on the 10-year yield. Yield curve steepens out 51 basis points. So a little bit of a movement there as well. Dollar weaker. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Sleepaway Camp doesn't fly in these days of social distancing, and many summer camps are facing the economically devastating decision to cancel the season. The American Camp Association estimates that there are 14,000 camps in the U.S., fueling an $18 billion industry, and many may not see it to 2021. On the same tick, are you desperate to get away but wary of cities, crowds, and a second wave of the virus? Step in line to buy your very own COVID camper. For decades, interest in motorhomes and travel trailers were a reliable indicator of the beginning and end of a recession. Sales would dip as a downturn approached and rise right before a recovery. But this time it's different. Sales are rising as America enters its worst contraction since the Great Depression. Recreational vehicle dealers report a tide of customers willing to shell out upwards of $100,000, dreaming of doing something, anything, that resembles a vacation. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our number one priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
Global news.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stocks are little changed right now. Investors are digesting further tension with China, lackluster virus drug test results, and the threat of further civil unrest in the U.S. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The S&P 500, again, little changed at 3043. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 0.1% on 32 points at 25,352. And the NASDAQ is up 0.1% up 9 points at 94.99. 10-year Treasury down 6/32, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil is down 2.5% on 87 cents at $34.62 a barrel. And COMEX gold is down 0.4% or $7.10 at $17.4460 an ounce. The euro is at 1.1118 against the dollar. The yen 107.70. Gilead Sciences, a stock we're watching this morning, it's down about 2.8% right now. Its drug remdesivir remdesivir showed only a limited benefit in a large trial of more moderate patients with COVID-19, a result that may shift perceptions of the therapy that's already cleared for use in severe cases of the disease. And we spoke to investor David Harrow at Harris Associates, and he says there's still reasonable value in American tech stocks, especially Alphabet.
In our global portfolios, we still have a large position in Alphabet because we believe if you mark-to-market cash and their assets and give them credit for some of the things they've been doing and investing, that it's still very much a value.
And watching shares of the Google parent this morning, it's up about 0.3%. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thank you so much. There are those that talk too much. That would be me, folks. Never Paul Sweeney. And there are those that report. Amanda Albright reports for Bloomberg on something that we usually take for granted, which is the cities of America. She had a beautiful article, the middle of last month on the revenue lost from the cities due to the pandemic. But in the last 24 hours, her reporting has been extraordinary, distilling in the hundreds and hundreds of Bloomberg reporters, the anecdotes going city by city across this nation of protest. Amanda, thank you so much for taking time with us today. What is the city away from the big cities that get all the cable TV focus? What's the city that's most interesting to you on this Monday morning?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. There's so many interesting cities right now. You know, we're seeing this kind of massive wave of demonstrations. I'm from North Carolina, so the city that I think is most interesting to me, just kind of personally, is the city of Raleigh, which, a few years ago was the site of a lot of peaceful demonstrations over budget cuts in the state, and now we're seeing Raleigh see this kind of rebirth of protests over the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Obviously, Minneapolis is another city that is just hugely interesting. And I think, kind of the broad comment you can make about large cities right now is that a lot of them are run by Democrats. And, we're seeing these protests in large cities that are still obviously coping with the coronavirus. But it's happening in places where it's not necessarily about Donald Trump. It's about police. And so it's just a really interesting dynamic politically, too.
Amanda, I know you wouldn't have come on if I told you this, but I have to bring in my colleague from Duke University, Paul Sweet. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Amanda and I have made our peace, Tom. So
okay,
we agree to disagree. But Amanda, I love your reporting here, and it's interesting. One could argue we haven't had necessarily the national leadership on this issue that some would like. So it really is falling to mayors down at the city level, and they've been dealing with this pandemic now for 10 or 12 weeks, and now they have to deal with the civic unrest. What are the mayors kind of trying to do here? It's a tough balancing act between supporting the police yet supporting the protesters who have valid criticisms.
Yeah, I would say just to sort of generalize a little bit, I think a lot of the big city mayors are saying they understand where protesters are coming from, but, they are worried about these kind of like fringe groups that maybe are coming in late at night. Some of them bring hammers and, they kind of cause a lot of destruction, and maybe they're not necessarily affiliated with the larger movement. And I think I listened to the mayor of Tampa, Florida yesterday, and, she said she walked with demonstrators, but, she was really shocked to see that things turn violent later in the evening. And I think, a lot of mayors are kind of urging this calm and urging folks to stay home just because of the coronavirus, which is another, concern that cities are dealing with, is that there could be a spike in cases as well.
Amanda, one final question. I began my early morning in shock at the news and, of course, the images that we see, particularly of the nation's capital. But I'm going to give you the question I had at the beginning of the morning, and I've still not gotten an answer. So you're going to give me an answer right now. Does all of this horrific protest, does it speed up the fiscal response that is urgent for our states and cities? Do you just assume they're closer to legislation because of this, and aid because of this tragedy?
I mean, I think that's a great question. I don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately. I think,
why is she on? You don't have a good answer?
This isn't really necessarily related to Congress, but one thing that I'm kind of watching for is, you watch some of the videos of police and, they're kind of decked out in gear, and a lot of people are questioning, why cities are financing police at such a high level, whereas, a lot of cities are making a lot of budget cuts. So I think on the local level, that's kind of the next question that mayors have to grapple with. Obviously, they're hoping that the federal government comes in, but it's been pretty quiet on the stimulus front for the past, week or two.
With Bloomberg News, Amanda Albright reporting today, as she will tonight, and through the week on the state of our cities. Thank you so much, Paul. Just an extraordinary Monday. I read up today, as you do in this business, on the riots of '68, which I remember clear as I can. Those two assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and in my childhood, just completely formative, the July riots of Rochester, New York, in 1964, which I remember clear as a bell. And this is different. This is clearly different. But I'll tell you, Paul, what a 24 hours.
It really was. And how many Monday mornings recently, Tom, have we said, boy, what a crazy weekend. And, just when you think the pandemic is more than we as a society can handle, and then you have what occurred over the weekend, and it's just even more. And you just wonder how much we can handle. But I think, we will go forward and try to heal from here. I think is kind of the message we're hearing from some of the civic leaders that are willing to, really speak out and take a leadership position.
What we're going to go forward to is the events of the week, and they are tangible not only in Europe, but of course here in America, and it culminates Friday with our coverage across all of Bloomberg surveillance. We'll do that on the nation's unemployment. It is extraordinary. Whatever you've thought and whatever you've read about, none of us prepared for what is modeled as 18%-ish unemployment. I still can't believe I'm saying that number. We are produced on Mondays by Richard Truman. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Have you wanted to speak a new language?
When family video calls are too good to miss. Your virtual quiz team is demanding a rematch. And one more episode just isn't enough. You need loads of data. Get a massive 30 gig for £10 a month from Smarty Mobile. With no speed restrictions, unlimited calls and texts, and a flexible 1-month plan, it's no wonder you Switch awarded Smarty Best Value SIM-Only Network 2020. Search Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. See smarty.co.uk.
Get your cook on with Asda, with rollbacks on our 227-gram Butcher's Selection sirloin steak, was £3.55, now only £2.85. And our 255-gram Butcher's Selection rump steak, was £3.55, now just £2.75. Have a sizzling steak night. Thousands more rollbacks across the store. Asda. Selected stores subject to availability.
At Lloyds Bank, we know that money is a concern for a lot of people during this time.
I'm really worried about the business. I'm worrying about you. And I think that's changing me. And I'm worried that somewhere along the line you might not love me anymore.
Oh, that's not true. Whatever's playing on your mind at the moment, Lloyds Bank, in partnership with Mental Health UK, can offer you support and advice. Visit lloydsbank.com/mentalhealth.
First, we're told that masks don't work. Then, we're told to wear them all the time. One week, we hear that the mortality rate is 2%. The next, well, who knows? In the time of COVID-19, there is so much uncertainty, and so much scientists are learning in real time, along with the rest of the world. So it's hard to know what you can be sure of and what's still a big question mark. Enter Podcast 19 from 538, where we'll explore the evidence behind the science in our fight against coronavirus. I'm science journalist Anna Rothschild. Each week, I'll investigate coronavirus mysteries, keep track of the latest developments on vaccines and treatments. Oh, and I'll try to edit out all the times I shush my family, since I'm recording this thing from the chaos of my home.
Search Podcast 19 to listen today.
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
24 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
How do you kind of view the volatility in the marketplace here?
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
Companies across the board, across industries, really trying to shore up their balance sheets.
A lot of economists are just throwing up their hands and saying, we don't know.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
There's only so much that you can speed up vaccine development. Because of all the dislocations, there's always relative value trades that you could be doing.
This could be a U-shaped recession rather than a V-shaped recession.
It's the uncertainty, I think, that is really spooking everyone.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Monday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. Coming up, we're going to chat with Scott Kessler. He's at Third Bridge, and we're going to talk about that sea change that is taking place in the digital and social media advertising space. Plus, John authors a Bloomberg opinion on his latest column entitled Markets Are Again Proving Immune to Violence. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
This flash is sponsored by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth number one in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Stocks fluctuate as investors digest further tension in China, lackluster virus drug test results, and the threat of further civil unrest in America. Treasury yields have edged higher and the dollar is slipping, and we look at those numbers every 15 minutes. Right now, the S&P is little change down, just about 1. Dow Jones Industrial Average is little change, down 5. And the NASDAQ is up 0.2%, up 18. The 10-year is down 7/32 with a yield of 0.67%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 1.9% at $34.80 a barrel, with COMEX gold down 0.7% at $17.3950 an ounce. The dollar yen is 107.70. The euro $1.1121, and the British pound $1.2417. Sources are saying that Chinese government officials have told major state-run ag companies to pause purchases of some American farm goods, including soybeans, as Beijing evaluates the ongoing escalation of tensions with the U.S. over Hong Kong. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Bloomberg Markets is underway with Lisa and Paul.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much. I just have to say, I am shaken this morning. It was quite a weekend, and I will say a lot of people were shaken by what we saw across the nation. We are not seeing it in markets. There is a disconnect of reality that we've been talking about all morning with respect to the tension that we're seeing socially in the United States as well as between the U.S. and China, and yet the resolution of fiscal and monetary stimulus. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, joining us now. Can you just start by talking a little bit about that, the fact that we're seeing green today in the market following such a difficult weekend across the country?
Barely green. Let's start there. I mean, the S&P 500 up less than 0.1%, so it's not like this is sort of an overwhelming sense of direction here, which is understandable if you take a step back and say, where are we in terms of how companies are doing? Put the focus on what investors in the end care about the most. And, you can point to certainly some specific examples of companies that have been hurt by what we've seen with the protests over the weekend. Target, an example there, it's down 2.4% at the moment. And then, you throw in on top of that some of the disappointment with treatments for COVID-19. Gilead Sciences notable on that score.
Wait, hold on a second. Before you continue to Gilead, I want you to talk a little bit about the underperformance in Target shares and Walmart shares, given some of the looting that we saw over the weekend in a number of different cities. What is the longer-term cost that people are talking about? Is it that? Is it something fundamental, or is it a sentiment-driven trade?
Well, I mean, you may have a little bit of both at work here. I mean, I hate to equivocate, but, when you think about what's the effect on the business, I mean, it's going to be something temporary at this point. Think about what happens to retailers, for example, when you have storms hit. They have to shut down stores, but, they eventually come back and things start to turn. And, when you think about, Walmart and Target, I mean, lately they've been among the beneficiaries of buying, as consumers were stocking up in response to the coronavirus. So, they have that kind of going for them, at least they have in the past couple of months. Now, that may well fade as the effect of the virus fades. So, that may be a larger concern down the road in terms of what their business looks like, in terms of, people's willingness to either go to the stores or spend more online, which has really been sort of a salvation for a whole lot of companies here. Walmart and Target, notable examples on that score. So, there's a lot that people have to work through, and it's going to be a while before we start to see, second quarter results to get a sense of, how well they're coping.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that's kind of the consumer front. I just saw, as I'm sure you saw as well, Dave and Lisa, U.S. manufacturing stabilizing a little bit here. We got that ISM data just a little while ago. Still depressed levels, but maybe we're starting to see a bottom form in U.S. manufacturing as well, which could be a positive point for the overall economy in the second half of the year.
Well, I mean, the real question is, what does the second half look like at this point? You go through the numbers on S&P 500 earnings, and you see that, analysts are anticipating recovery. I mean, you're still going to have lower profit than a year ago, just not as bad. You go from 43% decline in earnings in the second quarter to 25% in the third to 12% in the fourth. And by next year, you're back to profit growth, at least based on the estimates that we've compiled from analysts looking at individual companies. So, the economy clearly would have to kind of set the course, for where earnings may be headed. And, to the extent that manufacturing is a piece of that puzzle, you can look at the numbers, at least to some extent, as less reason for concern. Let's start there.
I guess I'm struggling to understand the current situation in markets, because we have the concern about rising tensions that have led to the violence, the like of which we really haven't seen since the late 1960s throughout the United States. You now have also rising U.S.-China tensions, with China basically telling agricultural importers from the United States not to import goods from America. This is being reported by Bloomberg, according to sources. Nothing seems to rattle the markets. Are all of these scenarios being priced in currently, or is the fiscal and monetary stimulus just so overwhelming that the numbers don't matter?
Well, I wouldn't say the numbers don't matter, but when you have, the Fed and Congress really stepping up with trillions of dollars of support for the economy, at the very least, it sort of minimizes the effects of what's happening elsewhere. I mean, it's no surprise that the U.S. and China have been at loggerheads to some extent lately, and to have it show up in agricultural trade is sort of understandable, because that's one kind of flashpoint, and it has been historically. So, that's part of the mix. And then beyond that, I mean, I just have to come back to the idea that, you are kind of in this lull period for companies and their results. So, until you get something more to work from in terms of what corporate profits or the lack thereof looks like, it's hard to see all that much direction. I mean, especially given the extent of the rebound that we've seen over the past couple of months in stocks.
Dave, just quickly, are you seeing anybody from the street, strategist-wise, saying, hey, this market's really expensive?
Oh, sure. I mean, it pops up as something that people are paying attention to. You look at, the S&P 500 relative to future earnings, and it's about as expensive as it's been in the last 20 years. So, there is concern out there. But, think about what's happened in the last few years with the bull market that we had before this year's bear market. I mean, you'd see the same indicators telling you stocks were expensive, and you'd see prices moving up anyway. So, there's nothing new on that score.
Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, thank you so much for being with us. And Paul, I almost did not do a dad joke today because I just couldn't bring myself to it, frankly. But I guess today, more than any, we need a dad joke. And Adam from Citi has this one for us. What did the science textbook say to the math textbook?
I don't know. What did it say?
You have problems. And don't we all?
Yes. And the science textbook has solutions.
There we go. Well done. Rim shot all around. We all need it on a day like today. Let us hope that going forward is a better day and a better week ahead for this nation. Right now, we are going to head down to the capital of our nation, our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C., where Nathan Hager has world and national headlines. Nathan.
And of course, Washington, D.C., one of the dozens of cities across the country reeling from a weekend of violence. Protest over the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Local leaders are struggling to contain the anger. CNN reports Beverly Hills and Santa Monica are going to begin curfews at 1 p.m. local time after a weekend of looting. This man owns a business in Santa Monica.
I'm inside the store just fighting for whatever, and it was just nothing you could do. They set the building on fire. I had to run over to the building next door and put the fire out. Otherwise, the whole building would have burned.
The unrest turned deadly in Louisville, Kentucky overnight. The police chief there says officers and National Guard troops enforcing that city's curfew shot and killed a man after someone in a large group fired at them. On top of George Floyd's death, there's protest in Louisville over the killing of Breonna Taylor, who was shot dead by police in her home last March. The demonstrations are raising concern about a second wave of coronavirus infection. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms spoke on CNN's State of the Union.
I am extremely concerned when we are seeing mass gatherings. And we know what's already happening in our community with this virus. If we're going to see we're going to see the other side of this in a couple of weeks.
President Trump has blamed the violence on a loose collection of leftists known as Antifa. He says he'll label that group as terrorists. Today, the president meets with Attorney General William Barr before holding a video conference with governors and law enforcement. For the first time, police in Hong Kong have banned people from gathering to mark the anniversary of the Chinese crackdown at Tiananmen Square. Organizers are citing the threat from coronavirus there, but that order is stoking continued concerns about Hong Kong's autonomy from China. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
At Bloomberg, we know a lot of financial experts.
He's a former president of the European Central Bank.
Global Financial Warriors is a classic textbook.
A lot of political experts.
If you were advising the President of the United States, what's the thing that he's not doing that he should do?
And lucky for you, we know a lot of science experts, too.
You talked about those reagents which are necessary for the testing.
It's also the behavioral psychological approach.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
When family video calls are too good to miss, your virtual quiz team is demanding a rematch, and one more episode just isn't enough. You need loads of data. Get a massive 30 gig for £10 a month from Smarty Mobile. With no speed restrictions, unlimited calls and texts, and a flexible 1-month plan, it's no wonder you Switch awarded Smarty Best Value SIM-Only Network 2020. Search Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. See smarty.co.uk.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
At Wix, we put customer safety at the heart of everything we do. But right now, that doesn't just mean goggles, steel toe caps, and yellow helmets. It means 2-meter distances, paying by card, and safety screens at checkout. So whether you want to shop with us in-store, click and collect, or have your order delivered to your home, let's do it right safely. Wix.
The IBM Flash storage solution can be broken down into 3 S's. Speed. Retrieve data fast. Scalability. Grow your storage as your business grows. Simplicity. Easily migrate and integrate with existing systems. Oh, and there's a 4th. It's surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £200 for 26 terabytes. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Visit ibm.biz/flash offer now.
Keep up with everything happening in the wild world of pro wrestling with a podcast on TuneIn. For expert analysis straight from the WWE to Steve Austin's no-holds-barred conversations with wrestling's biggest personalities, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
Who says you can't have a laugh while getting serious about America's pastime? On the daily podcast Locked On MLB, comedian and baseball fanatic Paul Francis Sullivan talks about each team, each pennant race, and everything else in the game, from rule changes and controversies to baseball cards and stadium food.
For those of you who are not familiar with me or the old show, I love to obsess over baseball. I'm talking baseball over the Super Bowl. We had a TV showing the division series during my wedding.
Search Locked On MLB on TuneIn to listen today.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. The S&P is fluctuating with gains for automakers and losses for drug makers. It had dipped earlier after Chinese government officials told ag companies to pause purchases of some American farm goods, including soybeans, threatening a hard-won trade deal. Gilead Sciences slumps after its drug remdesivir showed only a limited benefit in a large trial. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P is now up 0.1% up 3. The Dow is up 0.1% up 37, and the NASDAQ is up 0.4% up 34. The 10 years down 8.30 seconds with a yield of 0.67%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 1.7% at $34.90 a barrel, while COMEX gold's down 0.4% at $17.45 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.66. The euro's $1.1128, and the British pound $1.2452. A closely watched measure of U.S. manufacturing rose in May for the first time in 4 months, suggesting the industry is beginning to stabilize at a depressed level after a pandemic-driven plunge. The Institute for Supply Management says its gauge improved to 43.1 last month from an 11-year low of 41.5 in April. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, the COVID pandemic has acted as an accelerant on a lot of trends that were in effect ahead of this debacle or crisis, however you want to put it. And there is a question about the advertising sector, and particularly online, what it has done in that space. Joining us now is Scott Kessler, Global Sector Lead for Technology, Media, and Telecommunications at Third Bridge in New York. Scott, thank you so much for being with us. I want to start there, and you've talked a little bit about how we're seeing that acceleration in a sea change amid online advertising. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lisa. So, at Third Bridge, what we do is we talk with C-level executives and